Welcome to Alexandrians with Dani Karim, the podcast where we conduct interviews with authors, both living and dead ones, through the power of AI. In this episode, I sit down with Gary Fyles, teacher, best-selling author, neuroscientist, and founder and CEO of Think Bigger Publishing. We explore his journey, discuss how to think like a visionary, reflect on our encounters with psychological entities, how God sometimes speaks through dreams in children, the hidden interconnectedness of events, and the prophetic nature of meaning itself. Enjoy today's conversation, and please support Gary by buying his books and sharing this episode with at least 3 people you trust. Thank you for tuning in.
Gary, it's an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much for making room for this today.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's for people who don't know you and you are a man of many parts. How do you introduce yourself these days?
I generally it depends who I'm speaking to, really. Generally as a publisher, I think, publisher, director of Thinking Bigger, but also as a cognitive scientist. I think it's realizing that that's a lot of massive part of my role these days is utilizing what I know in neuroscience, really.
Yeah. And we just spoke about one of our common friends, Cameron Bright, who introduced us to who was the guest in last episode. And I have you in my phone saved as believer. I think belief is a word that means a lot to me, that I can ascribe to you, that I feel is a common thread among your work as a teacher, as a neuroscientist, as a publisher, and also as a friend, because I realized last year was not very easy for me, and you were one of the people who always reminded me in times of doubt or uncertainty to believe in the mission and to have friends who believe in me. So my very first question was, how did you develop this cardinal virtue, which is faith? Any moment where maybe you didn't have it, where you feel you found this, or were you born like this?
That's a really good question. I think to some extent it's always been there. And I can pinpoint certain points in my childhood where there was maybe not the word faith, but the word trust. That there was some trust in a process, that there was something that you just had to keep going. You just had to keep going. And it wasn't always there. I had times in my life, like really dark times in my childhood and early adulthood where it wasn't always easy. But there was always, without wanting to sound crazy, a voice that was there saying, just keep going, just keep going. And then I think I've told you how when I was teaching at BIS in Vietnam. So for listeners, that's an international school in Vietnam, considered to be potentially the best school in the country. It's just been nominated for International School of the Year, so that's pretty high praise for this school that I was working at. And I was there as a teacher and curriculum writer, and it was the children that were there that told me to go and write the books. And at that point, I didn't have the belief in myself. So it's when you say about faith, where did that belief and that faith come from? There was an element of it was listening to the children in Vietnam that gave me this faith in myself that I'd kind of forgotten. So even though I had it as a child, it diminished over years. So where does it come from? It was reawakened in me by someone else. And I think that's a really important point. And I think when you said, last year when you were going through a challenge and you needed someone else to just remind you that to have that belief in yourself and that other people believed in you. We all need that reminder sometimes, especially after a knock. A knock that you can have in life can set you back and make you question so much. And questioning yourself is where you stop having belief, I could talk for hours about it. I could talk for
No,
hours.
this speaks to my heart. I love that the children have been some of the messengers, and there's something very strange that happened to me, I think like a week ago or something, where I'm currently building a platform of authors that I talked to you about, and I haven't found a co-founder yet or investor, so I'm like carrying the load by myself. And I was making the salaries for the guys, and I was very short on cash for a couple of days. And then it was just one of those days where paying for the unit is like these instant noodles, yum yum, we call them in a way. So it's like I barely could afford that. But I was really like going to the supermarket, wanted something else, and it was like this child behind me at the when I was supposed to get in. She knocked me, say, Mr. Big, she called me and said, "Do you lost this?" And it was like $100 bill, like €100 bill, and I just took it and then vanished, and I was like, so surreal. But this whole experience, and I found it's very hard for me on those kind of days to not believe that sometimes it feels to me like the divine takes the form of the innocent to knock you back up in a way. And so my follow-up question for you would be, in times of trouble, what was a moment where that voice took form or something else to help you not stray away too much from the path, but recognize to the right kind of voice?
Yeah, good question again. I mean, it could get quite deep. It can get quite deep. The answer to that. Again, the children in Vietnam. Listen, as a teacher, you spend most of your time with students. You know, every day you're in there and you're with the same 30 young humans. And I quite often say, you know, the universe, we are all part of the universe. We are all the universe. We are all the universe experiencing itself from a different perspective. So you are the universe experiencing itself from the perspective of Daniel. And so all the students are the universe experiencing itself from the perspective of all these different students. And when you hear the same message multiple times from different places, you have to pay attention to it, because that's the universe telling you from multiple perspectives the same thing. I was talking to a friend yesterday who we had this very conversation with. And because he said he's been receiving the same message this week from several different people. And I told him this, you know, it's the universe. Everyone is the universe experiencing itself. And so when does that come from? It can come from outside, and it can come from multiple places. And it depends how attuned you are to listening to that message and to listening to, you know, I think the most dangerous time is when we stop listening, when we stop paying attention, when we stop trying to grow. The path of enlightenment, as a Buddhist, you can see my Buddha behind the things, I think, over there. You know, the path of enlightenment is the fact that you have to remain on that path and that you never fall off. And so it's accepting that you're always going to be learning. You're always got something else to grow into. You've always got space to move into. So the moment you stop listening to the universe telling you how to improve and how to get better, the moment you think you've reached enlightenment, the moment you think you've reached your best self, best version of yourself, is when you have stopped. And that's when the ego's taken over. If the ego's taken over and you think, no, I'm the, you know, I'm the mutt's nuts, then that's the point when things will stop. Things will start falling apart for you, because you've ceased to be on the path. So it's about always listening. And so it's about how attuned you are. You know, the less you're paying attention, the louder the messages will have to be. The more you're seeking for that message, the easier it will be to find, or the more open you are to it, you know? So people I work with, I tend to try and get them to be just open to it all, open to what they see, open to the messages, trust themselves, trust what they're finding the universe is telling them. Listen to themselves, think that's the other thing. You know, as a coach, one of the biggest skills, the biggest things you have to do as a coach is to listen to the person that you're coaching and get them to listen to themselves. Because it's the coaching process is to listen to what they say, internalize it, paraphrase it, and give it back to them in a way where, here, this is what you've just told me. This is what you need to listen to. And so it's good. A good coach is someone who can get their coachee to tune into whatever the message is that they are missing in themselves. So let's go back to your original question. Where does that message come from? It can come from outside sources, but they'll quite often tell you what you already know. And they'll quite often tell you what you need to hear because you're not listening to it within yourself. So for the students in Vietnam, they were telling me to be an author, to be an artist, to be an illustrator, to believe in myself. Because whilst I did in many ways, and I thought I had growth mindset in many ways, they pointed out to me where I still had hang-ups about myself, where I still had room to grow myself. And they pointed me in that direction. But that was something that I already knew deep down inside me. And that I'd talked myself into not believing, you know, humbly. Oh, I'm not the kind of person that can do that. That's someone much better than me. And they pointed out, no, well, you can do it as well. So I think
in my culture, which is very interesting, is the visionaries. And my father has connections to the Bedouins, like people who lived in the desert, in a way. And I had like an interesting experience where I had a phone call with him. It was 2 years ago. I was on a dirt bike through Asia, through Thailand to interview some monks, and I was like in this strange faraway motel, and I was just flooded with ideas and images and visions. And I had a phone call with my father. I think I'm going schizophrenic or something's weird. And he said, modern man can't hear God because of all the noise of these societies in a way. And like people saw these old visionaries as seers, but I think listeners is a much better way to see them. Do you think you being away from the Western world for an epoch of your life has allowed your sense of hearing to other people's dreams, your own, sharpened to the degree where you can act of them? And do you feel this is a threat to the children of today, that they will not hear this voice within themselves just because they're like constantly bombarded with all these distractions?
yeah, I think for sure the distractions and the screens and the messages are all part of it. But the messages have been there for a long time, you know. The ability to do, I mean, for better want of a word, magic, thaumaturgy, whatever you want to call it, as a way of connecting with people on a deeper level, and seeing, listening to the universe, whatever it is, you know. You can see it as a wholly scientific thing, coaching, and as a just being wise and understanding how things work and how people work and how psychology works, and it's all of that, you know. If coaching is understanding how psychology works, coaching is understanding how people react to themselves and how people respond to the internal messages they have, understanding how neuroscience works and how thoughts work and how trauma works, and understanding how, you know, another thing that I could do is just, and I didn't realize this until recently, is if someone tells me what their dreams are, I can go, oh, well, it means this. And someone said to me, did you know you could do that? And I was like, I didn't know that people couldn't. I thought this was just something that it just makes sense to me, you know, because again, if you know, well, I don't often appreciate how much I've learned, you know, because I'm just someone who consumes this information my whole life. It's built to this point where I get all of it. I get so much of it. I understand so much of it. Is that Is that to a point magic? Well, I do believe it is as well, because there's always been an element of seeing, of believing, of hearing, of knowing. Do I believe that everyone has got the same heightened ability to be able to tune into that in the first place? So thinking about your original question, with children, have they got as much hope? No, they don't. And this is the thing, we've always found ways of, certainly in this country, I don't know, I think this is it. Every country is different. Saying, the way that we treat a diversity of mind, I'll call it, but people's minds work in different ways. And some people are more attuned to some of this open connection that that we can talk about. The way that your father speaks. As I said, people are able to connect with God and hear God. Or whether it's, as some people believe, tuning into a wider network of consciousness. However it is, in the UK for sure, people have for centuries had that being restricted. Whether you go back a couple of 100 years where they were burning witches and getting rid of neurodiverse people, because that's essentially what it is. If people had epilepsy, people were neurodivergent. If people had special education, they would have just been burnt. They would have been got rid of. And that was one way to make sure that neurodiversity wasn't in the gene pool. And then there was things like just locking them into homes and making sure they didn't procreate. That was another way to make sure that neurodiversity didn't spread. And everything's been stopped. And there was a spread of neurodiversity again. And there is a magic. There's a magicness of people. People that I'm working with quite openly acknowledge it. I don't know if you heard of the telepathy tapes.
No, not
They
yet.
really were. You'll go down a rabbit hole. You'll go down a rabbit hole with that one. It's the telepathy tapes are almost as scientific as you can get, really. They're hours and hours and hours of testimonies of teachers who have taught children with special educational needs, where they have had incredible situations where there's been telepathic communication with children. And this is something that is being researched and being highly looked into. This is all part of the same situation we have. If people don't know what they have the potential of, if people don't believe in the potential of magic, in the potential of connectivity, in the potential of seeing, in the potential of knowing, believing, and if people believe that that's all rubbish, then they won't develop that ability. It's like anything. You said about belief, and it comes down to belief again. For me to learn the guitar, I had to believe I could learn the guitar. If I didn't believe I could learn a guitar, I wouldn't have picked one up with the intention of practicing to the point that I could get to play it. So there had to be belief in that in the first place. And there's an element of developing the ability to see and hear and know and connect with a wider universe, that you have to believe that that's something that you can do in the first place. And you have to believe that's even a thing. So actually what we've got more of a problem of is that the screens and the media and the narrative prevent people from ever knowing that that's out there. And that's where the problem is. If you remove magic from people's reality, and tell people from the very beginning that magic can't even possibly be true, they'll never believe in it. And that's the question really I think you're asking is, what does the future hold for people's ability to tap into what is our greatest ability? And it's about, and that's essentially what the battle is, and what the right and wrong is of it as well, because there is an ethics part of it. Can we trust everyone with that knowledge? That's the biggest question. Who should have the knowledge of that? Because we can assume that everyone is a good person, but we know that's not true, because we see it playing out in reality. Yeah, I think, I mean, if you don't mind me going on and just rattling on, I think there's an interesting point. As I said, there's something I've worked with a bit in the last couple of years is coercive control. Without, I don't know if no, I think I can name her name. A woman called Sharon Holland has been doing a campaign that I supported with Thinking Bigger, called her name was Chloe Holland, and Chloe Holland was her daughter. Chloe Holland commits suicide, and it was due to coercive control. Her partner was found guilty of coercively controlling her and putting messages in her head to basically kill herself. Now, it can't be understated how there is an element of manipulation there that is beyond human manipulation. There's the manipulation of the mind. And this is where coercive control overlaps into what we were talking about our abilities on a greater scale. Could you trust everyone with the knowledge? And I think that's the issue we have.
Yeah, it's one of the words that comes up to me is threats. And it reminds me, I don't want to go too far back. A couple of years ago, I have this friend, he always gets me into trouble. You know, these kind of people, they are incredibly fun to be around, but you need to support yourself in this friendship in a moderate doses. So one time I was with a festival in South Africa, and he was just putting LSD into my cup without telling me and said, we're going to have a good time. So fast and short, like I had like a 12-hour trip that I felt like I died 3 times and I was in hell and all those kind of things. But when I came back, and I noticed like he helped me for 8 hours, because I was like literally couldn't figure out between nightmare and reality anymore. Um, we had this moment together where we were heavy drinkers and we didn't want to drink anymore afterwards, and we both were very dirty from ruggling around in the dirt, because he had to protect me from wandering off, and probably God only knows what I would have done. And while going to that, I saw so many silver threads between the things, between the flowers and the animals and the sky, and I met this strange sage on the way who could see what I was seeing. I could see he had a similar experience once, and he built like a little temple out of stones. And I couldn't get rid of the feelings that we are so desensitized to connectivity between certain things. And later on during my work, I had similar experiences where I'm very connected to my father. If he has a heart issue, I have pain, for instance. And I noticed like with his wife, she's one of the best nurses in the world. She went avoided his death for hundreds of times. And every time my father's not well and she's in another room, I can see in her face like she knows before what's happening in a way. So there seems to be a connection as well. And when I did counseling with people, particularly who were stuck in pathological relationships with men, for instance, I always we always discovered that there was this dark thread between them and this person who was manipulating them in a way. And I feel like certain people are just more aware of how things are connected. And I'm just wondering on your take if you feel that human beings, with our sense of meaning, has a prophetic quality to it. Because every time I meet something, I meet a co-founder or I fall in love, it's always a sense of knowing, a sense of this is one person of your path. And I don't even need to develop this the relationship. I've discovered it. Anyway, and it's like, how can you have this kind of experiences without having some form of internal knowledge about what the future will entail? I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but do you believe that this
No,
is
it makes perfect sense. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Again, you have to be awakened to that path, don't you? I suppose it's being awakened to it, and this is why religion tries to do it. This is why philosophy tries to do it. You have to be awakened to it to as I said, with children, you have to believe it's there. You have to have a knowing and knowledge of it there, of it being there, to really develop that awareness. But that
you?
said, there's an innate knowing deep down anyway, isn't there? That's the thing. Once you become aware of it fully, it's a case of, well, I always knew it was there anyway. So for me, there's, I mean, I think I've told you the story of having an imaginary friend and um, being teased about it as a child to the point where you stopped. I mean, I didn't get teased about it too many times before I went, okay, well, I'm not having that one again. I'm not gonna. But knowing that it was still there and having this kind of relationship with this entity that I was just aware of, really. There was an awareness of this entity that had a name that I couldn't, at at such a young age, I didn't know where that name came from. Nobody could explain where the name came from. And then when I was at university, when I finished university, someone that was been on my course that wanted to do a tarot reading, said she had gypsy blood and she wanted to do a tarot reading for me for the 2 years we were at university, and I kept, no, I'm not interested. Then on the last day, she she dropped something in my drink, um, and dragged me out to the car park because we were all having a drink at the pub to celebrate the last day of lectures. Dragged me out to the car park and without her cards, gave me the reading and told me stuff from my childhood that I couldn't remember, or I could remember, but she shouldn't have known about. Do you know what I mean? Like things that I'd been doing since my childhood that were quite strange, which I could tell you about in a minute. I've got to come on to it, come back around to it. But she she told me loads of things that she shouldn't know. She told me that I was able to do everything that she could do, I could do. And she also then said to me, "And who's tomorrow?" I went, "Fuck off." Tomorrow was my imaginary friend when I was a child. She went, "No, it's not your imaginary friend. It's a guiding spirit. It's a spirit for you. Just keep onto it." I can't tell you how much that conversation messed with my head. Like I spent, that was my spiritual awakening. That was like a period of maybe 8, 9 months of thinking I was going crazy, having the most bizarre things confirm the craziness, still thinking I was going crazy, having even more bizarre things confirm, and still thinking I was crazy, and then eventually needing a scientific explanation for like, okay, I've got to understand this because I'm a scientist. I'm a practical realist. And so I had to come up with a scientific explanation for why I could be experiencing the things I was experiencing. I received that scientific explanation to come to terms with it all. But that name, that Tamara name, as I said, never went away, and it became something else after that. And then you said about meeting people who you just know. So I met Natty who was going to be the illustrator for one of our books. I was looking for an illustrator. That's all I knew. I was just looking for an illustrator to work with, someone who wanted to work on a book, and because I had a couple of ideas. And I met her, and all I knew was her name was Natty. And we chatted for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours when we first connected, about the idea, about thinking bigger, and about what my plans were, about what the company was going to be. Just feeling like I knew her. And it was only then, when she shared with me her email address, I found out her name was Natalia Tamara. And she's now the co-publisher at Thinking Bigger. And we met and knew straight away that we knew each other. She knows this story, and it somehow doesn't make her uncomfortable. But it's, do you know what I mean? For me, it makes it makes perfect sense. And that alone was one of the things that made everything make sense around it. There was no lack of belief after that moment, because of all of the things that had gone into place for us to meet. Because if one little detail in my life had been different, I wouldn't have met her. And that alone tells me that there was purpose, and that there was a trajectory, and that there was meaning. And that gives meaning to everything else. Suddenly, the darkest things that happened in my childhood, if they didn't happen, I'd realize that I wouldn't be where I am now. And that's a crazy, crazy thing, when you can be grateful for abuse, when you can be grateful for failed relationships, when you can be grateful for being treated badly. Like, that's empowering, you know? So it's come back round to, like, as you said, to the thing about how do you get in tune to that? Being open to meeting those people who you just know, who it's a development, isn't it? You need things that develop you into that person. You need things that give you the confirmation on the way. It's highly unlikely that you're going to be someone who just has that insight from the moment. But at the same point, only when you get to the end, you realize that you always have. Does that make sense?
One of the things that we talked earlier about why education isn't educating about this at all. And a story that comes to mind is I met a pimp once, and it was quite fascinating for me. I was always interested in psychological mechanisms and strategies in people, even from the dark side. I love those true crime series in a way. And he was in a neighborhood, and he was always having this cool car, but I always felt there was something very strange in regards to him and the relationship between the woman that I felt were admiring, and then I observed what he was doing. And one of the things that he was doing was pretty much making the prettiest girl in the area go out with him, and then he would isolate that person from the family to some degree in a way, so that she went for advice to him and for the problems to him. And why am I sharing this? The word conscience is called faculty of knowing from Greek in a way, and it's it feels to me like one of the signs of a malevolent societal structure is if you replace that divinity within yourself and replace yourself in there. I'm in Berlin right now. One of the things the National Socialists, for instance, did was replace Adolf Hitler with as the savior figure with the position like Jesus Christ had, for instance. Suddenly they would worship him, and I think it's a good signature of evil if you find ways where they don't listen to that voice within yourself. Listen to me, because it's an excellent way of controlling people in a way. And I'm always thinking, is this really by accident? Because it's through these stories where if you had an encounter with the divine, it's there's part of this oral tradition that is completely lost, where a father or a friend passes on this encounter to other people. And that, I think, for instance, is what the biblical corpus is, or the religious corpus is. it's encounters that we had with the divine, so that they don't get lost in some way. I'm not sure if I'm making any sense with this.
No, you make
This strange
perfect.
story.
No, you make perfect sense. There's a lot to unpack there. I think you're absolutely right in everything you just said. So you're talking there first of all about internal dialogues, essentially. Internal dialogues are our conscience, the voices that play out in our heads. Now, again, we've got to accept a neurodiversity in people. They say that some people don't have voices in their heads. Some people don't hear voices. Now, maybe that's because they're trying to understand it in the wrong way and they're actually expecting to hear, but they still have a dialogue that they don't even realize. Some people have a dialogue and don't register that dialogue, you know? Sorry, I'm gonna say.
There's modern psychologists I don't feel understand this very well. I watched, for instance, a documentary about the Iceman, like a mafia serial killer. It's a great way where a psychologist sits down with a serial killer, and it's very interesting to see, because the traditional idea of a psychopath is somebody who does not have a conscience. But during this conversation, you can clearly see that, for instance, at the end, the serial killer asked, "What do you think of me?" And the psychologist goes, "I think you're a great waste of potential. And I think you would have been a great fighter pilot if you would have had this predisposition to not feeling so much, or you could have a good soldier or a good executive or something." And seeing this in the face of the person was like, he's never explored that path. And I feel that it's much more better to see these people as not hearing or listening to certain parts of their brain. If you don't consult your conscience, it's very quiet, and it's like a relationship in a way. And it's and I feel like
Well, I think
understanding
yeah,
that these voices are not as internal as we think. I heard Wozniak, for instance, the founder of Apple, say recently, one of the reasons why AI will take longer is because we haven't grasped the understanding yet that memories are not stored in the brain entirely. And I thought that was so interesting. This idea that maybe there is a realm where entities exist, and maybe there's something where they are already stored and can be accessed that we don't understand right now. It's like thinking maybe a brain could be a portal rather than I don't know, like a hard drive or something like this. I went off
I
the
mean, yeah, you
I
come
went
back round to no,
yeah.
there's a lot to unpack. Yeah, even more to unpack. But again, you're hitting so many things on the head that I've been talking to lots of people about recently. So to go back again, consciousness is development of an internal dialogue that will be developed through our learning and through our experience. So we have the idea of an old soul, and an old soul can have feeling and can have emotions and can have a moral compass. But we also develop that through the stories we're told. So I know for myself, I've known, my experience is rooted in me, because I'm the universe experiencing the universe from my perspective. But I'm also very aware that because of my ability to astral project and empathize with other people, that not everyone's had my experience. But my experience was growing up that in schools, I would hear biblical stories and I would understand the messages. Sometimes they would be spelled out to us openly and clearly. We learned stories that told us of sins and virtues. We learned stories of bravery. We learned stories of compassion, of charity, of benevolence and malevolence. And I had people in my life, even though I didn't always have the greatest role models at time, and sometimes the way they behaved was hypocritical to the messages that they taught us. I had the messages of being a good person, not to be greedy, not to be this, not to be this, you know, and I listened to those. And I knew I was listening to those, and I could see other people around me. And I could see adults as a child. I could see adults not listening to those. And I thought I could see the hypocrisy. And so at a young age, I decided that I had some great role models. My grandmother, I recently reconnected with her, not reconnected, she's passed away, reconnected with her messages to me and thought about the things that she would tell me and the things, if I allowed her voice into my head to take control for a while, which is what I basically did, I thought, what would she tell me? What do I remember her always telling me as a child? And she told me, pay no attention to the rest of them. You be you. You just be yourself. Take no notice. She told me, take no notice of them a lot, including adults, including family members, including anyone that was against me. My grandmother was possibly my greatest champion, I realized. So it's a privilege to have her as a voice in my head that can always be the one that goes, you can do it, keep going, but would also challenge me if I was ever being an arsehole. You know, I knew that she wouldn't be completely my advocate under no circumstances. She would pull me up if I needed to be pulled up. And so this comes back to what we were talking about dialogues in our head, internal dialogues. And this is something that I realize that I've become extremely adept to, is deciding whose voices I allow in my head. And if I don't want somebody's voice in my head, I can remove it. I can decide that that person's opinion doesn't matter to me. But it's more than that. There's a metaphysical aspect to it, and I have to meditate that voice out of my head. I have to be aware of it. I have to be aware of where it came from, with the intentionality that it was put there, with the methodology that it was put there, because people use different methods to get inside someone else's head. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, sometimes we allow people into our heads, and some people are less skilled at preventing that and just allow anybody into their head. And this is where social media comes in. Social media is, as you said, replacing those voices in our head, replacing those messages that were divine, that were organized, that were manufactured and ensured that through a government process, these are the messages we want people to be receiving. Propaganda, however you want to call it, there was some form of organization of that, so that everybody believed and thought the same. And that led you to neurotypical. And this is why neurodiverse people were a danger, because they thought differently, because they thought something different, because they were magic, because they could get people to think things in all sorts of other manners. And they could get people to other people around them to think dangerous things because they were able to do things that were dangerous. The voices that we had were divine and were controlled. We have education, we have schools, and you have to be a good person to be a teacher. I genuinely believe that 99% of teachers are genuinely wholly good people who are doing the job because they genuinely want to be good for the next generation of students coming through. Whether as a system it's working is a different thing. But the thing is you have to pass tests to become a teacher. You have to prove yourself to be a good person to be a teacher. To be that person who is allowed to be the voice that puts ideas into the next generation's heads. So the messages you've got to be giving them all day have got to be wholly good. And have got to be those ones that when that student goes home, the things that they're telling themselves are positive things. And so again, this is why you want to be someone who only gets people thinking good things about themselves. Or that when they think of you, what messages, so when Daniel thinks of me when I'm not around, what kind of sentences do I want you to have in your head from me? Well, I want you to have things like, you can do it, bro. Yeah, mate, you could believe in it. Your business is incredible. Your ideas are fantastic. And the business that you're creating is something that the world needs. Those are the kind of things I want you to hear, because that's what I truly believe. Authentically, those are things I want you to remember. There are people who are not so benevolent in their wishes. And there are people who will leave voices for their own needs. And people can do that and get inside your head through different manners. Pity, worry, threats, power. There's different ways, and in toxic relationships, there's all manners that through just the mannerisms and the actions that they hold, but also because we are all connected. We are all connected, and we've got to appreciate that the mind expands beyond the brain. We talk about it. We talk about being able to meditate, being able to astral plane. So we have to appreciate, as you said, the thread. There are these threads between us all, and the mind extends beyond the physical space. So you came on to whether we're all actually tapping into a greater consciousness.
Socrates once said,
And
maybe I'm butchering him on this one, but I think he said, education is the kindling of a fire, rather the filling of a vessel. And it reminds me of the idea, maybe not just to educate our children, but to foster the right ghosts within themselves in a way, to guide them into the right connection. And
exactly.
I've introduced you to my friend and Jan Heinemeyer, the CEO of Guardians, a while ago. I worked for a while as his advisor, and he's deeply interested in cognitive psychology. And I was writing a book about cognitive psychology at the time. And one of the things I always asked myself when meeting him was, what spirit is currently animating my client? And because sometimes he was this charismatic, I can do everything kind of person, taking the market by storm. And then sometimes he would show up and he was so nihilistic and he didn't believe anything could work. And I also, it felt like his words had a very different color, almost to the degree where, and then we both like named this personality of himself as the doubter, which is very funny, but it's an old word he picked for the devil, which is the anti-encourager, so to say, in a way. And I feel like it wouldn't be the worst thing to think of these vices or sins, if you mentioned, more as if they would be creatures or entities in a way, because it's not entirely clear to me that they are ultra personal. And I think like maybe if we can learn how to spar with them better, we can convey that more on. Anyway, and in regards to, I have a question. Do you believe you being surrounded by children? I think children are also very unbiased to. They haven't learned all the things that are not impossible for them yet. It's like,
Yeah.
like my last business partner really liked working with me. He said like, because I was like re-raising $1 billion within the next 3 years, and he liked that because I haven't been fucked so much that I still like didn't know like what kind of like path this would set us on in a way. Do you think like you being surrounded by unpropagandized children, so to say, helped you to open up the doors to your own perception as well? I'm not sure if that question made sense for you, but I'm always interested to how people are specialized in their tools that they are using. And I think if you surround yourself with children for multiple years and they don't know what's impossible, has this allowed you to think bigger on your own terms as well?
Yeah, I think whilst wanting to answer this with humility, I think there again it's about accepting neurodivergence and accepting we're all different means accepting that I'm also different, and that knowing that I was different as a teacher, and the kids love that. The kids love the fact that I was very different as a teacher. I was not into a lot of the tweeness. I was so authentic with the kids. That was the main thing, that I didn't like putting on an act for them. That doesn't mean that I didn't perform for them. I did, and I made a clown of myself. I would mess around. I would constantly be telling jokes. It would always be jokes. Most of it was through humor to try and make sure they're always paying attention. But the authenticity of it, of me as a teacher, was always there. And I think what I spotted in kids is the fact that they don't have so much ego either. So when I say about us, we are all the universe, and we're all the universe experiencing itself from different perspectives. And we have to listen to the universe. So when the universe tells us things from different perspectives, we have to listen to it. What I should have given a caveat to at that point, but I didn't, was that is only the process when somebody's talking to us without ego. If I come to you and actually I'm thinking about myself, I'm not going to be giving you the messages that you need to hear in the universe. I'm going to be giving to you what I want to say, and it won't be the same. And we can actually spot that a mile off. We can spot it a mile off, and I'll come back to a few things that signpost that as well for us. But the thing that makes children so wonderful to listen to, and so adept at giving us those messages we need to hear, is the fact that they can talk to us without ego. They will happily tell you what you should do in life. You know, these little kids coming up to you and going, "You should be a YouTuber." And you know what? I should listen to them. You know, this is the thing. They knew what they were talking about. I was the adult with the ego at that time, going around going, "No, I'm a teacher. I'm this. I'm this." Literally, the ego going, "No, I'm a teacher. This is who I am." You know, and they were the ones that made me question it and go, "Hang on, listen to the universe." I think for them as well, it's said, yeah, they're not so. As you said, are they open to the whole magic of it as well? I think so. Yes, I think they're far wiser than adults can be because they're not told what not to believe in. You know, and that's one of the things that, again, good teachers try and do, try and keep children in that naivety, but also learning about it as well. You know, it's holding on to that magic is something that's really difficult.
Met a girl here recently in the co-working space, and beautiful Ukrainian, one of the very beautiful girl. Didn't like her. I don't know why. I couldn't like her at all. There was something within me that was physically appalled to her, and I couldn't name it. And then I talked to my friend like Jar Malik. He's one of the world leading experts for AI. He's also been on my podcast, and he said she's very big on learning the art of seduction and in all these kind of things. And he said one of the things that we like about women or people in general is a sense of innocence, to be without back thought. And she said, "Daniel, this woman is like purely Machiavellian. She recruits lovers, or as she calls them, people who suitors, she calls them." And I didn't know it. I didn't like it. I said like, oh, there's a sense of innocence of not using speech in order to get something purely for the adventures of yourself, that I was aware of, almost like an entity in a way that was very strong with it. And she said that it was very interesting to me. He said that what men like in women is this sense of uncorruptedness to a degree, or maybe in men as well. And I thought that was so interesting, where children didn't have as much time, I feel, to develop this inner Machiavellian, and where this says also, I think, something about our natural states of how we are composed, that this extremely deceptive part comes later, maybe a little bit.
I think you do see it though. I think different words get used, and teachers feel bad for saying this because a good teacher, again, will know not to judge a child too harshly on their behaviors. As a growth mindset means that we all make mistakes, we learn from mistakes, and those mistakes include our behavioral mistakes, especially when you're a child. If you can't make mistakes in your behavior as a child, when can you make them? So you don't judge children too harshly. However, it is possible to acknowledge behaviors, and some of those behaviors you see in schools could be described as sly, manipulative. You get gossiping, you get bullying, you do get Machiavellian behaviors in schools from children. However, as you're saying, they're generally learned from somewhere else. It's generally inflicted upon someone who's had it inflicted upon them first. It's someone who's learned those behaviors and is copying them, because most behaviors we have are assimilated. So we generally tend not to develop behaviors. From my experience, there's not many behaviors that are innate. I know there are a few, but generally innate human behaviors that we can develop. But in terms of being Machiavellian, planning your behaviors for the manipulation of other people, I think is definitely, as you said, it's something that we develop more as adults. But I think this is where I think there's people like yourself, as you said, you were repelled by that rather than buying into it. Now that's more of an interesting point. Why? Why this thing that generally, clearly was successful for her didn't work on you? And that's because you're working at a different level and you are open to things that most people aren't open to. The fact that we're talking about this, we've got to appreciate that this podcast will not be of any interest to the majority of people out there, simply because they're not interested at this level of discussion. And the kind of things we're talking about will not even make much sense to them. And they'll think we're crazy. But the fact is you see things on a much higher level. So the way I describe it is it's frequencies. We know that light has got a bandwidth between infrared and ultraviolet that the humans can see. And I'm sure that potentially if you've messed around with psychedelics, you may have also messed around with the peaks of your ultraviolet lights that you can see, because that's something that's generally well documented, that when people are on LSD or mushrooms, that purples can see more purple. Natural purples can see more purple because they're starting to play around with the frequency of bandwidths of light that they can see. And we all have different bandwidths of sound we can hear. And we've all got different bandwidths of certain other things we're perceptive of. Fish and birds are highly acutely aware of magnetic bandwidths. Humans have, and we can develop those. There's evidence that we can develop a sense of awareness of north, south, east, and west if we work on it hard enough. One thing that have been talking about recently is, and we work on, and we work on as a principle with thinking bigger, is that intention has a bandwidth. Intention has a tangible matter that's associated with it. And when things are made with intention, people who are perceptive to that intention see it as clearly as they see color, and can taste it, and it can turn your stomach. And people like us can turn on a film, can sit down in a cinema, and in the first 2 or 3 minutes just be like, I can't watch this film. Just because the intention of it is wrong. And the intention of it doesn't sit with you. And you can spot something that's made purely for making money. And you can spot a conversation where someone's coming to you for the wrong reasons, where it's not because that they're interested in you. And that's where we come back to Kant and unethical interactions with people. I think we've had that conversation before. An ethical interaction is where you go to that person because they are the means to the end. You're not using them as a means to another end. I'm not speaking to you today in order to be able to get money from your friend. I'm here to connect with Daniel, and you're here to connect with Gary. So this is a wholly ethical interaction where there's no ulterior motive. And this is it. We can spot those ulterior motives because it's about intention. Because everything that's made is made with intention. Everything that's done is done with intention. And the only things for the people like us who can see intention, the only things we're interested in are things with wholesome intention.
I had an interesting conversation with my father recently where I felt very intimidated and dwarfed by my current task. Like what you mentioned earlier with your grandmother, the idea of like, what would you ask her and what's the voice? Like my company tries on working on the preservation on consciousness and annulling conversation between the dead and the living. And I felt, I think I mentioned to him that I was afraid of the amount of backlash that I will get. And I said, like, how can I manage this without supporters? And he said, who are you representing? You're a representative of the words and the authors. And he meant these people are very powerful. And he made this case that there is like some force hidden within the works that is superhuman in a way. And what you just described, us having, there's no sponsor that allows me, like forbids me what to say. There's no network that can kick me out like this Jimmy Kimmel incidents or whatever. It's just a dialogue. And a dialogue is, I think, literally Dios and Logos, and the Logos is the word, which is another word for truth in a way. And I think if two parties exchange what they believe to be true, and it's the truth speaks to them, it is a holy interaction in a way. And I think like it's, if you look at modern media where people write for the sense of creating leads and people go, and I feel like we've lost something very precious in regards to our relationship with the word. You as an author, what do you make of that? And because it feels like these things are not going into the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, the big, what you can't avoid is the conversation about AI here as well. As you said that, so if we rewind 10 years before AI, and that's a massive difference in the world, we already have gone down this path that you're talking about, and the problem that you're saying there about that we've lost respect for the word. The lost respect for the word it was even longer ago. You know, propaganda, and when we go back to even say the 1940s, we talk about wartime, UK, Germany. The use of the word there was they knew what they were doing. They knew what the word could do at that point to change the way that people think, because that's what the word does. So, Alan, trying to think, I can't remember his surname now. The author of, trying to think of his names. I'll come back. It'll come back to me. There's a great writer, Alan. He talked about how you can't talk about writing without talking about the origins of writing. And the origins of writing come from the original scriptures, scribings on a wall of a cave. And when those images then became symbols, symbols with shared meaning between people. So initially, the first attempts at writing were literally drawings, pictorial drawings, pictograms and pictures that were, if we think about, you know, a picture of a buffalo on a cave wall with spears in its back. What was the purpose of that? Was that just art, cave art, or was it something more than that? And I would suggest that it's something more than that. I would suggest it's not. It's not them saying what they've done. It's not them congratulating themselves because they killed. I don't think that much effort would go into it. I would suggest more to the point, it's a learning tool, and it was a way of conveying a message to other people. One person had an idea of, why don't we stick sticks in the back of this buffalo to kill it, and then we'll be able to eat it. You know, a shared plan of how to hunt, teaching other people how to hunt. At the very beginning of humankind, that would have been of purpose for scribing, for actually going to the effort of putting that on a wall. You know, to all that effort, you want to get something from that. Why would you do that? Because you wanted to change the way that other people thought. And that person that was able to put the picture on the wall and convey that message had a magic that other humans at that point didn't have, because they had the ability to change the way that other people thought. They had an ability without words to change the way that people thought. You then move those into symbols, and a symbol with shared meaning. Again, that symbol then can't be understood by other people, but someone with the shared learning and the shared information as you have and the shared understanding of that symbol, you can convey a message to them that's hidden from everybody else. Go into writing, and then it's actually something much different. Then people can all share that message. You teach them how to read, and then suddenly you can convey that message. So fast forward to 2021, and I write my first book. And I wasn't thinking about the magic of it really at this point, but now I appreciate it. And luckily for me, I was doing it with a wholly wholesome purpose. You know, my intentions were wholly good. Think Big Playroom, Just Try, a book about overcoming the fear of failure. I wrote that story with the intention that that story would help people overcome the fear of failure. I wrote it not just for children, I wrote it for everyone. And what we've now found is that book is enjoyed by people of all ages, and it's enjoyed by people all around the world, and it's been read all around the world, and it works all around the world. And I get messages from people in other countries emailing me saying, I've read your book, Think Big Playroom, Just Try. And even though I'm 30 odd, I've gone back to university because your story made me go, you know what, I'm going to just try. And the miracle of that is that a story that I've written can be read on the other side of the world, and my words can change the way somebody else thinks. And that's the magic of writing. The magic of writing is the fact that when we put something down on paper with intention, then that intention works, if we're a good enough writer, to change the way someone else thinks. Going back to your original point, have we lost respect for that? Well, yes. Because if you talk about marketing copy, how much crap has been written in the last 60 years of marketing copy for advertising, for manipulating the way that people think, purely for making them spend their money on a Coca-Cola, for buying the next pair of Nike trainers, for sending their parcel with DHL. Whatever it is, the amount of writing that's been, the amount of human energy that has been put into, I mean, I'm smiling because it's ridiculous. The amount of human resources of this planet combined has been wasted on promoting brands. If you think all of that human energy could have been invested in finding a solution for X, Y, or Z, but no, we've invested all of this combined human energy into writing words to promote copy for big business. It's bizarre. Now we fast forward to where we've got AI, where it's not even humans putting it in. And now we've got AI, which is, I'm quite damning about AI. I do say it's literally made for people to not think. And that's literally what it is. You know, someone can make something without having to think about it. They just have to put a few words in, the minimal thought. So with minimal thought, they can do something. And that's fine, because making things does take no thought sometimes. But literally, AI can create a whole textbook, a whole book of information with very little thought put into it. But who is that book then for? Well, you know what? I know that I'm really good at spotting AI. I'm good at spotting AI if it's an image, and I'm good at spotting AI if it's text. Why? Because I'm good at spotting intention. And when you find AI, it's soulless. There is no intention because the computer wasn't able to put intention into it because it's not part of the algorithm, because it's not got the magic, because it's not got the soul yet. I'm not saying that AI won't. I doubt it. I personally doubt it. I think there's something missing that we don't know. We can't put the magic into yet. I think for me, it's honestly, I see the as you said, the respect for written word. No, because we've given it over to process and probability. You know, essentially AI tools just run on probability, and that's not what creates a really good book. You know, I don't write my books by going, oh, what word should I use next? Oh, that one works. You know, you have to have the bigger picture, and AI doesn't have that bigger picture. It works on a completely different process without the intention. And so yeah, I think we've completely lost our sights on what the written word. And again, I think even worse than that is when we've got questions about whether there's malevolence in there. You know, we certainly have had materials printed for children that are not appropriate. There's I'm just gonna say the names, I don't care. A famous author in this country is also a guy who is a famous comedian, David Walliams. David Walliams was a part of a comedy duo, did some very now questionable comedy. Now you would look back, and I don't believe in cancel culture in that sense. I think, you know, someone that did something in the 90s that was acceptable maybe in the 90s, to then judge them on that now isn't quite right. However, this guy's now gone into writing children's books, and the children's books are awful. And I know that I probably shouldn't say that as an author, but other authors do, so I'm going to join in as well. His books are awful. As a teacher, I wouldn't use them. They had, for books that are around now, they had inappropriate tropes. They had racist descriptions. They were wholly inappropriate. Prejudices of sexuality of all sorts. And the guy was recently on TV doing a Nazi salute, which, again, without wanting to get political, for me, I think it is quite highly questionable. And then the guy is hired by city councils to talk to children, ignoring the whole rest of the behavior. You look at the books, the intention of the books was wrong. The intention of the books, if you someone who sees intention, you can see through it. They're made to make money, and then they're not there as a wholesome product for children to learn from. You know,
Yeah, it's
you go to the best educational places in the world, and there is an appreciation for classical music, for classical literature, for philosophy, for the classics, for languages. You go to the council houses and the council estates where I grew up, and it's the Beano, and it's Grange Hill, and it's things that tell you it's not cool to be clever, and it's things that encourage antisocial behavior, and it's things that encourage things like David Walliams has in his book. That, for me, is where we've got the questions. And then also questions on children's literature where it's just nonsense, or it's an extension of what we see on social media for brain rot. You know, the brain rot thing is awful at the moment. The amount of stuff out there that's literally just made for people to not think about, to prevent us from questioning and prevent us from learning.
yeah, and I think like people like you who are, I talked about with Cameron as well. Cameron shared a story where when he was Cameron Bright is a friend, a common friend of Gary and mine, where he was an Hollywood actor at an early age, and he got famous so early that when he was with his crew, all these celebrities, after the shoot, they would go downstairs and have a drink at the bar, and Cameron was alone in his room because he wasn't allowed to drink yet. And we later discovered like why he's such a free thinker. And he said, well, he's learned how to be excluded by the tribe because he's in this room, even though it was very uncomfortable. He learned to endure exclusion in some way. And the reason why I'm saying this, I believe you have this ability also to just say what's on your mind, and I think you're not for sale. And I think people like you are so important to point out what they are seeing and listening to in the schools, because I'm in Berlin right now. We have both from the radical left and the radical right. You have examples of early indoctrination for children, where it has led to atrocities on both sides. Where Berlin is very interesting because there's memorials but also old propaganda pieces everywhere, where you can still see the threats of the old cold leaders of the past trying to do their dark magic from the past. Anyway, what do you think is one of the things you can use to detect whether or not a book is good or evil, so to say? Because I believe that although every book should be preserved, I still think like it's very important for me, for instance, like reading the manuscripts of dictators was an educative experience. It was very important for me to read the autobiography of Adolf Hitler, to read the Marxian manifesto, to read what these seducers, how they got the people together, you know. And what do you feel is something somebody should pay attention to in regards to figuring out what their child should read or should not read in this regard? Because it is
Yeah.
I don't know. To just give you an example, then I'm gonna shut up. In Germany, there has been a big movement, for instance, of diversity and inclusion coaches and drag queens, for instance, who go from school to school to teach about white guilt, for instance, which is like a certain view of the world and promoting sexual tendencies that like gender is a construct and you can take puberty blockers if you don't feel like a boy, which has led to like a whole epidemic of young boys in particular who would have grown to be perfectly healthy gay men, like you taking these puberty blockers and then going to all sorts of problems. So there's the schools are a battlefield for political ideologies right now in a way. So I think having your idea on what a parent should allow their children to read, or even at least like
Yeah.
notice an ideological manuscript from a book which is supposed to free you. I know there was a lot of information, but just had to throw it in your direction and see what's going.
No, I think it all ties in quite nicely together. I think, first, I think one of the things we've got to look at in terms of reading materials is there's so one question you asked is about what makes a book good or evil, and I mean those are very strong terms to use. To say, I wouldn't say David Walliams's books are evil. This guy that I was talking about, I would say that they've just not got the best intentions. And because they haven't got the best intentions and they're written by someone who isn't particularly healed as a person, I think this is it. This is the thing. He's a person. He's a person.
There's an illustration, Gary, that I find I want to share with us. There's an old biblical painting. It's called the Tree of Life, and it's on the left side. It's pretty much is a fruit, which is representative for Christ, which is the heroic mode of being, which leads to the survival of the species. And on the other side is like a representative for sin. It's like missing the mark, as a Latin term for leads to death. I think like one of the ways is like, is this book going to help the flourishment of the child and the society? Or if everybody follows this, things are getting awful in a way. And I think like I think still like there's value in reading books that are written by people who have bad intentions for educational purposes in a way. And I think maybe even,
Yes.
but I think it's interesting also just hearing the thoughts of an author, because I know that your intentions for writing your books have been to encourage people. And I think
Yes. I think I was on your page. I think for me, just as an author, I just wanted to clarify that in case, because this might be out there. I don't want David Williams thinking that I'm suggesting that he's evil for writing a book that
I think it's just, he proposed it.
Exactly.
Yeah, no.
Exactly. I'm sure he doesn't care. I'm sure he'll never know. But my as I say, I think there's benevolence in it, and I'm with you. You know, it's is it good or is it not good? And yes, there are books. How do you choose? I think it requires us all accepting the fact that we can learn, keep on learning. I think it's really hard. I think, you know, I don't believe in banning books. I don't believe that David Williams' books should be taken off the shelves. I think they should be there. And if people want to read them, they can read them. And if a child wants to read them, they can. What I would think is more important, and this is where I was going to go, is it's about if we teach people to be a good enough reader. So you're saying you read the books of people who we would question the views of, but you read them as a intelligent, mature, and critical thinker. And that's the key point. So in the UK, and I don't know what it's like everywhere, I've looked at the stats in America and they're even sadder. But in the UK, the average reading age is 9 to 11. That is the average reading age of all people, including adults. So the average reading age in the UK is that of an 11-year-old at best, which means most people in the UK read. I mean, the vast majority of people in the UK, we're talking about a very small amount of people in the UK can read better than an 11-year-old. And critical thinking doesn't come into our reading curriculum until 14 years old. Now, this is key because it means that most people in the UK can read, but are not critical thinkers. That means they are primed for everything we've been talking about receiving messages from branding, about political propaganda, about being manipulated by the things they read, about being misinformed by news stories that are a load of rubbish, even about not being able to perceive when something has been written with the wrong intention or if something has been written with no intention, because the majority of people have not got the skills in place to judge a piece of writing on any of that. So they can't judge whether something's been written with bad intention. So you give Mein Kampf to a fucking moron, excuse my language, to a fucking moron in the UK with a reading age of 9, but who spends most of the time in his pub and thinks he's got it all sorted. And he watches GB News and hears that manipulation, but he hasn't got the critical thinking to judge whether what he's being told on the news is bullshit. So he's full of hate. And then you give him a piece of propaganda and he's not able to judge that with any critical thinking either. So it's the whole picture we have is it about the individual text? No, it's not about David Williams and his awful books. It's not about, it doesn't matter about those. They can be there and 11-year-olds can read them. They're not the problem. It's the fact that we've got a system in place that deliberately teaches people to read up to a point where they can be manipulated, but not beyond that point where they can resist the manipulation. And that's our greatest failure.
The university where I study was very, very Marxist, and it's like, just for instance, like how education and the cultural climate can affect you. I'm an entrepreneur, but that came after I dropped out of university. In front of my university, University of Hamburg, is a big sign where it says the depth of the country, and below that is another sign with the capital of the richest 1% in the world, and a long text that indicates that these two things have something in common. And it's like when I studied, it's the very idea for me to have my own business The idea that property is theft was governing this school to a very, very large degree, to some sense, which for me was, I still need to get over that to some degree, because as a business owner, I'm a CEO. Like, I need to have a good relationship with money, otherwise I'll not be able to pay salaries. I know you also have a challenging relationship with money on this side as well. I'm just thinking, like certain ideas are conveyed within books that can cause trouble also in a way. And I think, like, I don't know how you solve this problem of what you put into the
That
curriculum in a way, but at least there should be, I don't know, how do you solve that? What do we educate our children into?
it's different. I mean, again, what's interesting is that you would say that thinking bigger books are wholly good. We say our thinking bigger books are wholly good. There's no messages in there that have got bad intentions. You know, whether it's growth mindset, metacognition, accelerating learning, you know, self-acceptance, resilience, every single message we're trying to put out in our books is wholly good. They still piss people off because our message of becoming intelligent is in itself a challenge to the system.
Yeah.
You know, our message of the fact that what I was just telling you about the fact that we've got to develop people beyond the reading age of 11, that our aim in this country has got to be that we raise people to become critical thinkers. It's got to be that. That's got to be your intention always, that people can become critical thinkers. Otherwise, they're manipulated. I mean, if we allow the masses to be manipulated, then we're never going to be moving in the right direction, because the person with the greatest power and the greatest money is always going to be the person who has control. And we need to relieve that. Coming back to what you're saying about there was something I wanted to go back to actually as well. You were mentioning about the right and the left, the extremists of messages in schools, and it kind of ties into this most recent question as well. How to ensure that there's that wholesome message. And again, I think there's a trust. I don't believe in. I honestly don't believe in schools that we have the amount of craziness that some of the media tells us. The stories of children identifying as cats, and of children being given messages to encourage them to become transsexuals, and some of that I think is really exaggerated. But I also think that it would be exaggerated if you heard that there was a promotion of right-wing ideologies in schools as well. I think generally schools are pretty balanced, because there's an awareness of you don't want to piss off the parents. Then schools tend to be fairly innocuous, and that's actually part of the problem as well. They don't want to tread on any toes. They don't want to upset the right, and they don't want to upset the left. Schools have got to be non-political. In this country anyway, schools are meant to be non-political. They're meant to be partisan, and they're meant to be um completely unbiased in the way that they put out their information. However, they are also still government controlled and have some element of things that they're expected to comply to. So in this country, they follow the monarchy. There's certain days that get promoted, and there's certain ideologies that you're not allowed to talk about. You're not meant to talk about in school whatsoever. So you're not even meant to acknowledge that there's in schools, teachers are not meant to acknowledge that there's an existence of concepts other than capitalism. You're not even meant to talk about capitalism, because then that would acknowledge that there are alternatives to capitalism. That for me is bizarre. You know, as we're not educating. You know, I'm not saying I'm people. I've been accused many times of being a communist or something like that. I'm not. That wouldn't necessarily work along with being the CEO of my own company. You know, we live in a society, but the idea that we can't go, can this be a situation that can be improved, is where it's questioned. Like the fact that we can't look at situations and go, can we make this better? You cannot, and again, that's where we go back to the very beginning of the conversation about belief. If you don't even realize that there's an alternative to our situation, you wouldn't believe that we can change the situation. And that's what we've got with young people believing that they can't change the situation, that they've got no power to make this world better.
And I think how a school or society or treats people with different belief systems tells you a lot about the maturity of that particular state. And one of the phenomenons of, I think both, whatever, I think all these parties these days are more like cults rather than actual political organizations. So they're like clubs. So it's more like there's a code of how you speak and what you're supposed to. It's rarely like individual opinions that led these people to despise or favor certain things. It's more like adopting the mindset of the herd in a way. But like one of the things that I find interesting is that the lack of true diversity of belief systems within a school or a country is really not good. It's like, because then we're all marching alongside the wrong direction in a way. Anyway, let's take a small break. I will make a commercial break for this afterwards, have another coffee. After that, I would like to talk with you a little bit more about the business side of thinking and growing bigger, and then we move from there. Fine with you?
Nice one, man. Yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
This episode is brought to you by newvpn.online. Whether you're a writer, a rebel, or a researcher, NewVPN encrypts your digital life, shares your data, and lets you explore the world freely. Go to newvpn.online, use the code Alexandrian to get a special discount, and support the podcast while you're doing so. NewVPN, your mind is free. Make sure your browser.
Hi, sorry.
No worries, mate.
Just put my headphones back in and
These AirPods Pro are really good, right?
sorry.
Do you like the product, the AirPods Pro?
Yeah, it just works well. I had to get it for the publishing kind of stuff, for the design. It's just better for doing stuff on there and working with the iPad. I quite like the fact that I'm not really into that kind of whole brand thing. It was really weird when I had the money to go and do it. I had to go and buy like a new laptop and new bits, like a new iPad, and I came home with all this Apple kit, and I hated it. I genuinely was like really repulsed by the fact that I'd bought all this really highly branded stuff that cost so much money. And I thought it was so bizarre because I knew that most people would be the opposite. Most people would be like, "Oh yeah, look at all this amazing stuff I got," and I felt completely the opposite. But it's grown on me in the sense of it's made me realize how easy it is to do things. The fact that I was able to just get the earpods out and it connected straight away. There was no like, hang on a minute, dude. I can do some work on the iPad and it's straight away on the laptop. It all just works.
But you despise for the brands. I think it ties well in what we've spoken about, which is like if you can see past the illusions or the conditions that other people try to have on you, you can see things for what you are, and you're not just not and enchanted by it. I think brands also have like this aspect as well, where they create this illusion for you. But I think seers like yourself, they're seeing these things for what they are, and then they just don't mean a lot.
As you said, yeah, it's cults, isn't it? It's cult. I mean, for me, it came through Buddhism. Buddhism was really helpful because it was about the not wanting. I found myself at different times in my life getting bought into the, oh, you've got to have this, oh, you've got to have this, and if you allow yourself to buy into that consumerism of wanting that thing that you can't afford, there's that suffering in that we can impose upon ourselves for wanting the material things that we can't have and can't afford. So I gave up that, but it doesn't help me sort of give up all the material wanting. And I think that moving to Vietnam was good for that as well. I had to pack all my stuff up and put it into storage. and like relinquish everything, that all of the bits, all of the trinkets. You know the film Labyrinth, and the girl's got all
No,
of the. You don't know the film? Oh man,
I'm gonna write it down.
the David Bowie classic. It's a classic film for children, but definitely check it out. At the end of this, there's a girl, and there's a kind of a replica, a facsimile of her room in a junkyard, and all of her trinkets were just, she saw them as being trash, and like it didn't mean anything. I don't know why I thought of that film now. It's it. Moving to Vietnam, putting all of the stuff that these items, we allow our possessions around us to kind of define who we are sometimes. I know people who, you go to their house and they are defined by the things they can show you that they've bought recently. Then, and that their room will be a representation of who they are as a person. And I used to be, don't get me wrong, and even if I pull these down, my bookshelf behind me's got items on that book. There's a Yellow Submarine Lego model that was bought for me by my kids because I like the Beatles. There are things in my room. I'm not beyond that of having things that represent who I am as a person to some extent, but being able to put all of that into boxes and put it into storage and move your life to the other side of the world without those things to somehow show who you are. Suddenly now, the only thing that is who you are is you, and so
Yeah.
I think people that go traveling, like yourself, when you went traveling through Thailand, it was you and your bike, or however you're traveling, it was just you, and you couldn't pin your identity onto trinkets and onto images or brands or anything that represented you as who you are. And this is the sad thing. There are people who, they are represented by the brands that they have. They represent this, it's this watch, it's this car, it's these shoes, it's these jeans, it's this aftershave, it's whatever else. The brands, as you said, people buy into them as though they're something special, but they're not. They're not something special. Their own. So I'll share with you a phrase that I came up with the other day. Everything's bullshit. Everything's bullshit. Money's bullshit. Money isn't bullshit. It exists, but it exists mainly as numbers in a program, as pieces of paper that represent the gold that doesn't exist anywhere if you try and find it. And those numbers seem to be generated out of nothing sometimes. The worth of something is only what we put on it. And we've had this conversation about putting a mark on our own worth. How much is it for me to work for someone for a week? Or, people want to know, put a price on my courses and things like that. And that's a challenging thing. We put a balance on something, but the money is worth nothing except for what it gets you. And what it gets you is power. And where does power come from? Power comes from how many people believe your story. And it's about getting the most number of people, or the right people, to believe in your story. So gaining an investor means getting that one person to buy into your story, to see that this thing that you've created is genuinely going to happen, for them to buy into it to the extent that they believe it's going to happen as much as you believe it's going to happen. To gain that traction for thinking bigger, we've got to gain more and more people believing in what we're doing as a publishing company, to believe that in me, that I've got the potential to actually make this happen. And it's all about believing in our story. It's not, and not just the thinking bigger story, but my story and who I've been. If I go around talking about neuroscience, but I've actually got no background in neuroscience, nobody's going to believe it. And I had to overcome my own imposter syndrome to realize that I had my background in neuroscience that I did, for people around me to start agreeing. The fact that I'm now talking to other geniuses about neuroscience and they're going, dude, where did you learn all this from? Okay, well, this is where we get the belief in it then, because we've now got a publishing company that's backed up by these neuroscientists, these people, and we've got a film company and we've got these people, and then you put all of it together, and all of the people we're working with, the departments of education, the universities, the schools, the film producers, and you put all of that together, and then we get more people believing in our story because there's something to believe in. It's not that I'm just going around, and this is what I find out. You probably find it as well in business. I go do a lot of networking, and you meet a lot of people who are all talk. Who I go to meetings where it's in person. And if anyone that's ever been in any of those meetings watches this and hears me saying in it, you'll also know what I mean. There'll be people that will come sit down and go, well, I've got a X, Y, or Z company, social media marketing company, or an accountancy, or this. And if you peel back any layers of this, you find out there is nothing. They've got no clients. They've got a static web page. They've got a Gmail account with their latest Gmail account with their new business. And I'm not meaning this to damn anyone. This is business. And I promise I'm not looking down on anyone for this. This is how a lot of people start. I didn't, because I took a different path just because I was naive. I did it my way. But you get a lot of people going around saying that they've got this, and this. Peel back, there's nothing there. And that's where, again, you're not going to get the belief. To get, if I had a company that was a window cleaning company, that's never going to grow bigger than Portsmouth. Well, I'm not going to get someone to come and invest hundreds of thousands of pounds into a window cleaning company that's never going to grow bigger than Portsmouth. First of all, I wouldn't need hundreds of thousands of pounds to build a company like that. But secondly, no one would have a belief that that company is going to create the profit required. So the maximum that that person with their window cleaning company is going to get as an investment is maybe enough for a few sponges and a few buckets. Because even a venture capitalist who wants to get 10 times their investment back isn't going to put into a window cleaning company hundreds of thousands expecting to get £1 million back, because that window cleaner is not going to make £1 million, not unless he's into wash a lot of windows. However, thinking bigger is different. We are thinking bigger. We're a global operation. We're working with people across lots of countries with the idea of franchising this across the world. We're working with departments of education. We're working with the National Association for Gifted and Talented Children. As I said, you put in together all of these things that we're working on because of our hard work, because of our belief, because of the belief of other people. And we cannot say how important that is. The belief of other people as being what's projected, thinking bigger to be where it's, including yourself. You would have only introduced me to people that you have done because you believed in what we had, because you saw what we had. You saw the potential, you saw the vision, you saw the message, you saw the product. And the product is really important as well. Because when I go to business networking meetings, and people say, I've got X, Y, or Z business, and everyone around the room is nodding, because everyone knows that half of those businesses are just talk. And then I sit down and I say, hi, I'm a publisher. And I look and I see people's reactions, and there's an eye roll. Oh, okay. He's a publisher. Yeah. And then I get my books out, and then I see the change in their faces, and there's a look of, oh, he's not just making this shit up. They want to see the books. Oh, can I have a look at and they start looking oh my God, these are really actually quite good, aren't they? These are amazing. Like, yes. because I'm not just talking about it. Why? First of all, as I said earlier, I don't believe in being a hypocrite. If you say it, you do it. If not, you're a hypocrite. And as a teacher, you get called out on that. That's what the children did. When I was teaching the children about growth mindset, and the moment I didn't show it myself, they then were the ones that gave me the belief to start believing in myself again. They called me on it and said, hang on, you tell us to believe in ourselves. You tell us to put the word yet. And you say you're not an illustrator. No, you're not an illustrator yet. You're not an author yet. You believe it. And so they made me go, oh, hang on. Yes, I'm not a hypocrite. So for me, I said I couldn't start a business without something tactile there. So I started my business when I already had the books. I started going around telling people about it only after I had something. Why? Because I came from a background of teaching where you can't tell someone you've done your planning and you haven't. You'll get caught on it. Whereas in business, you can. In business, you can say anything you want and no one's allowed to say anything. The same as politics. It's the post-truth. And this is the thing. We're in a situation where we've got a post-truth reality, where in business and in politics, you can say anything you want. Well, thinking big is different because we don't believe that. We're only going to say things that we've actually got. We're not going to say we've got connections we don't have. We're not going to say we've got work we don't have. We're not going to say we've got money we don't have. We're actually going to do it. So going back to what we were talking about earlier on, with company, we've grown it to this point with the belief so that people also buy into it too. As a brand, it's not quite Apple. It's not like the brands that people have bought into. As I was saying, people go around with, I've got this watch, I've got this car, I've got these things. People have bought into those stories of those businesses long ago for whatever reason. They've all managed to write their stories, but they started at a time when it was easier. Money was everything. If you had control of the advertising, if you had the money to advertise it to everyone through newspapers, you'd have that reach. So money was king. Now through social media, money isn't quite so much. We've got a slightly more even playing field, and we've been able to position thinking bigger as a genuine global challenger to publishing companies purely through our hard work and through the story that we're telling. But that story we're telling is buying people into it, and that is giving us the power.
People can. It's interesting. A picture that came to my mind was the image of a priest. I didn't like priests growing up very much in my community because they were preaching, but I can see that many of their words were hollow, and you can see that there was not experience of their personal life that backed up the very thing that we're sharing about, which is why I didn't connect to the meaning of those kind of things. And I think one of the superpowers of you and your publishing house is that you've walked the path and you actually believe in every single author you have under contract and every single friend of yours. And a study that comes to mind, I forgot the name of the study, but it's about a teachers being told that there's certain geniuses in the class, but they are not geniuses. But then just through this piece of information, they actually perform tremendously better than the other students because there's a sense of transferred belief, I believe, from the teacher to the things. And I think
Absolutely.
when you mentioned we live in a post-truth society, how do I put it? Books are also a vehicle to convey belief, I think, and this is a transformative experience, I think. And in order to lead such a venture of yours, how do I put it? My father, for instance, invests in me without expecting something in return for himself. And I feel you acquire certain virtues only by extreme deprivations. And like I kind of like live my life like I've already died once. And one of the things I think we connected over is where you're authentically trying to solve a problem in spite of what this problem can do for you in regards to your personal enrichment. I don't even think like if you get like $50 million tomorrow, I don't even think you would know how to properly enjoy yourself. If I'm being, I'm like,
Uh,
and I'm like, and then like this thing of like what I'm dreaming with Alexandrian, which is the name of my new company, is to support Alexandrian spirits, which is like people who solved the problem or dedicated their life to something at the cost of their own life, not in a material kind of way. But I feel we've kind of lost the quality of entrepreneurs, of founders, of authors a little bit, where they solve where solving a problem was rewarding in itself. And I feel this, particularly the VC world, also it's about we do this, we exit, we are multimillionaires, we go out. But I don't think the old authors who, if you read them, people don't even know how to read the old books anymore. They have like if you Machiavelli, Shakespeare, Aurelius, all these kind of things. They had such an advanced way of communicating themselves where you need now an AI just to say, what does this sentence mean in a way? And I genuinely believe these people created these works because they believed in us and then they wanted to create an artifact that helps us in some way. If you have like a message to the authors of today, what would you like them to know in regards to not just what to write, but who to write for?
that's a great question. I think again a few points that you raised. I think that you said about believing in all the authors that I work with. Um, and you're right. There is a deep connection between myself as a publisher and the people that I choose to work with as authors. And this comes to what my advice would be for authors in general, is that we look at thinking bigger books as being message driven and purpose driven. And I think that's where again I say it's about intention. When you write something, what is it intended for? And again, there are some books where they're made for making money. And guess what? They probably make money. And we'll probably end up making some of those books ourselves because it would be stupid not to. Um, and we are to some extent, I've got I've got the books here because it's easy to illustrate. We've got the thinking bigger books. We've got these ones where it's more cerebral. They're books about thinking, about metacognition or accelerating learning. They're very cerebral books. The topics are quite clear, quite profound. As I said, it's message driven and they're unashamedly message driven. Our more recent ones are a bit more fun. That doesn't mean they've got less meaning. It's just not as obvious. It's not as in your face. It's more thought. They are hopefully going to make a lot more money because they're more about bringing in reluctant readers, the ones whose reading age isn't so high, and it's maybe just to encourage them to read more. And then we've got our adult books that are a bit more that are literally about enlightenment and finding paths to greater knowledge and learning. And so all of the books that we're creating are purpose driven. And that for me is the greatest thing. What is the intention of writing books? And this is where we come back to some of those malevolent causes for writing literature that we've had. Some literature that we give to children and adults is made with the wrong intentions. I truly believe we've got books there intended for only teaching people to read to a certain point. We've got books out there that are intended to make people not want to read any other books. We've got books out there intended to make people stupid, to make people not. We certainly have literature. We had in this country, we had magazines. Do you remember the 90s? Magazines were the whole thing. We don't really get magazines anymore. But we had it in the UK. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to talk to a German about UK culture because I'm sure you've got a very interesting perspective of us. But during the
Oh yeah,
90s,
yeah.
there was
Particularly what's happening over there right now, which is like,
oh mate, it's crazy.
yeah,
But in the 90s, we had proper lad culture. it was all about encouraging guys to be drinkers, to be, misogynistic, high misogynistic it was. Um, and we had materials out there that were encouraging people to take up the behaviors that we would associate of being less enlightened, less wise, less learned. So this is where we have fantastic literature out there as well. And you look at some of the classic literature, as you said, about things like Shakespeare, where such incredible stories and such incredible um, moral guidance was provided, as well as historical commentary. We had Shakespeare's stuff is highly interesting because, again, some questions about where it's even comes from, but because it's so well written. The fact that it's all written through poetry, and it's a social commentary, and it's um, a moral discussion, and it's humor, and it's got incredible stuff. And then you look at other stuff like 1984, where it's a work of fiction. However, we look at it and it's been almost used like a playbook.
Yeah.
And so, was it used as a playbook, or was it that he had an incredible vision and he was able to literally see what time was like beyond where he was? And we've talked about this, in terms of time is itself a very questionable thing in science at the moment. We're looking at it and understanding time in a whole new way. Um, but George Orwell was able to see a world that way before other people were. And I think that there's a good author and a good writer is able to share their truth in a way that other people will get it. And the reason why I say this is as a teacher, I think, and why my books have worked is because as a teacher, my speciality was in coming up with analogies and stories to help children understand something that was beyond their understanding. So as a science teacher, I would find an analogy to explain a scientific concept. Because if a scientific concept was outside of the realm of understanding and experience of a child, I had to give them something that was within their realm of experience that they could attach it to be able to understand this new concept. So that's where my background as a cognitive scientist. I didn't just train as a teacher. I trained in a particular area of teaching and pedagogy called cognitive acceleration, where it was about conceptual development and about taking this person's ideas, understanding what they understand, and helping them to shift their worldview to a greater position of understanding. And this is where thinking bigger essentially is taking that concept that led me as a teacher for 20 years and going, okay, well, that's what each book does. It's going to take someone and give them this message in a way that they will understand it, so they then move on to this position afterwards. And I think generally most of our books have got that as the core of them. And I think for us, that whether that's a book about for any purpose really, if you're writing a book that's fiction or fact or non-fiction, we've got a guy writing a book about how to become financially free. Well, it's just the same. He's putting in his messages to move people from this, to give them this information to move on to this, and he's using all the different ways to package that guidance up. If you're writing a book about spirituality, you want to help put someone along that path and help them understand it and develop your worldview, and that's again when we come back to where we say about writing is magic. Because if you are really good at what you do, you can put your words onto a page. And as the children in Vietnam said, the children in Vietnam told me to be an author. They said to me, Mr. Gary, every day you come into school and you pour your energy into us. This was them talking to me without ego. A couple of children, one break time, stayed back in the classroom, wanted to talk to me. And they said, every day you come into the class and you pour your energy into us. Stop. We keep telling you you've got to be an author. Write a book. And when you write that book and put your energy into that book, then every time that book is opened, your energy will come out. And as I said earlier on, that genuinely is the case. I put my energy into a book and I put the messages of just trying and of being aspirational and of these heartfelt messages of go and do it. You can believe in yourself, of belief. And they were printed. And they can be printed on the other side of the world without me even touching them. And they can be delivered to somebody who can open that book and my words come out and change the way they think. And that's the magic. The magic is that I can change the way people think with the messages and the story and the analogies and the concepts that I put down. And that's again where we've got to accept that's the message for authors. You have that power, so you've got to take that responsibility. What do you want to put into that book? Do you want to make people hate other people? Or do you want to spread love, spread understanding, spread belief, spread positivity? And thinking bigger, we're choosing those. At the same time, I know I've got a good friend who's a horror writer, and I don't judge him. What he's doing is great because he's giving it to the people who want it. So we say our books are for everyone. He doesn't. His audience is horror lovers, people who love the horror genre. And he only writes it for them. He might write it for people to bring them into the horror genre so they can enjoy it. And I don't judge anyone for that because reading's great. If people read, that's great. But even then, when I speak with Rob Ulitsky is his name. He's a brilliant writer. He's really hard working. He writes great stuff. He does brilliant content on social media. And he might be writing a children's horror book for Thinking Bigger. But he's wonderful. We've had that conversation about, putting them something with a bit of meat in there, having a message. It's not just about scaring the living shit out of the people that are reading his books. He can put more in there. So I think, for me, as I said, message is key.
What are some authors of the past who've impacted you more than others? I feel also one of the ways to become an author is to read, like and particularly for me, my story, like when I got kicked out from school, like books have been one of the tools that kept me out of prison myself, I would say, just by finding these works of art where I feel there were friends who were giving me manuals on how to succeed in life. What were some authors who you made friends with through the form of books?
My favorite authors, I picked them up when I was at sixth form, many years ago. I had a great sixth form teacher, English teacher, who we did English language and contemporary literature was the course I did. And he introduced us to American short story writers, and I just developed a bit of a passion for that. So one of my favorites that I go back to a lot is Raymond Carver. There's something gritty, something really gritty about his writing, and judgmental in a non-judgmental way. Kind of, you're left to realize that. So the short stories he writes are quite often just snippets of an uncomfortable situation, like the end of an argument and the uncomfortable silence between the couple as before one of them storms out of the house and leaves forever, or a guy sat at a coffee in a cafe nursing his coffee because someone's just passed away, and horrible, sometimes really horrible bits of writing that just expose you to something so painful, or so to make you go, you know what, I want better than this. I'm gonna go for something better than this. Another one, T. Corrigan Boyle, similar short story, American short story writer. And again, just great at showing you like an underside of humankind. But then, yeah, I think some of the philosophy that I read, I can't really not pay acknowledgement to the impact of children's literature and everything I've done as well. I mean, children's literature, as a children's writer, some of the there is some fantastic work out there. Where the Wild Things Are by Morris Sendak, the Dr. Seuss stuff. There's some brilliant work for children that just makes you question a little bit more as well.
Do you think this is one of the things you would like to achieve with your books, or that you feel is the purpose of a book rather than giving an answer, is to spark a question for the reader?
I think books end up in the hands of the people who are meant to read them.
I mean, bend the threads. Do you believe that there's a relationship between the book and because sometimes you have this feeling like, oh, was this written for me? Or you find sometimes very strange where you find the right book at the right time, or the right book when you're at the wrong times within your own life, and then it's a messianic
I
messenger.
think books are really difficult, aren't they? Because I mean, we've talked about book marketing a fair bit as well, because selling books is not an easy thing. People think it's a lot easier than it is. But actually, when you look at the number of books that are being sold, and you look at who buys the book, certainly for children's books, children don't go onto Amazon and browse for books. So how do you sell a children's book? Because the children's book has got to be sold to the parent. So you've then got to connect with the parent. That's also not easy, because parents don't often go on to browse for books for their children. Parents go on to browse books for themselves. So how do you get so for us, the marketing to get the book out there is a challenge. So I know that will increase as our company continues to build, and as we get access to different distribution routes, which we are, it will change. But as I said, books tend to I believe that our books will end up in the hands of the people that are meant to get them, and more, through education, they'll be forced into hands of people. But it's said that books tend to come to us at the right time, because you have to, but only if you're that person who is on the path of enlightenment. So if you're not looking for enlightenment, if you're not someone who's seeking to learn, you're not going to get that book that's going to help you learn. So the fact that you're saying that is a good sign for you, mate. That we're both people who accept that we're learning still, and so
I don't have
those
the
rooms
best.
through.
I find learning very painful, to be honest. Like it's it feels to me just like a continuous. It has a Phoenician element to it, where it just feels to me like dying and then being reborn, and neither process is particularly enjoyable to me. Where you're like,
That's about it. Yeah, this weekend I think I mentioned in my message to you the other day. We're doing something that's brand new to us. I said, working with Department of Education in Colombia, and we're having to put they want me to go out and do training for the head teachers. We don't know what kind of numbers. We don't know if we're talking about 30 head teachers, or 150 or 250 head teachers. And they want me to put a price on my course of what I would do, there's no question. I know I know my stuff. And so we can easily do the 4-day course, and yeah, that's fine. But it's a whole new thing for me to learn to how to make a proposal and to price it all up and to write it in a fashion. And nobody is able to show me one. Nobody can say, oh, here's one that worked last year for these people. No one's willing to do that. This is something where I've just got to pull it down from the ether. And this is, or if my more crass version is just pull one out of my ass. Like sometimes it's expected.
This is
But we,
hilarious. One of the questions I ask is like, um, the same brain that caused the problem will not always be able to solve it. And I think there's limits also what you can do as a visionary. I think like knowing, for instance, it's like no matter how much I put my antennas into the ether, I am not a programmer, so it's like I need some help from somebody who understands this kind of thing. But I think since I'm a former chief revenue officer, so I've helped like hundreds of people with pricing. A good way to think about how to price your product is thinking about yourself as a university owner, where you think of the person you're selling to as a student, where you think they are graduating to different classes and each of the class is an answer to a problem they currently have in a way. So when you make the recipe, your offer to them should be the main problem that they have, ideally like transformed into an outcome, and where there are sub ingredients. This is called a value stack, which are like a book pretty much. There's like the book could be how to find a mate who will not steal 50% of your company's worth, for instance, or whatever. I don't know why this came to my mind, but there you have some sub points as a table of contents, which are how to think through the problem, where you've graduated from all these subclasses, and then you calculate not what it's costing to you to deliver this, but what it would be worth to the other person. Well, if I come in and I help you to sell $100,000 ticket, and I know first you need to have the positioning done, we need to figure out how to find the people, how to do the pricing and offering. Then I put all these modules into a menu, like a recipe, so to say, and I think, okay, he's gonna make over 1 year, let's say $1 million. I would like to have 10% of that revenue delivered to me in milestones after we graduate you through these prices. And then you are not selling you hours anymore, but you're helping the other person to acquire an outcome or to avoid a painful tax that they're currently paying for their own ignorance. But I think since you're a teacher, it makes a lot of sense to just transform the outcome that they want, which is caused by a problem, and then put it into a recipe, so to say, in a way. And that's like it's teaching basically. Like pricing has a lot to do with teaching and designing a curriculum. But we can talk about this another time. Speaking of business, big task for your leadership, Gary. I think teachers are. When I speak with my father about you, he calls you rabbi often, because rabbi he's a Jew, converted Jew, and rabbi means teacher in Hebrew. So it's like, what is a test of your leadership? Because I feel as a leader, you're constantly teaching, you're telling stories, you're asking questions, and you unite people by trying to fix a common problem and get whatever people want to join you for.
yeah, I think there's aspects of leadership that just become natural. I think there's talking to other business leaders. I think that I'm grateful again. The path that I've had as a teacher is really useful. As a teacher, you've got you don't choose the children that end up in your class. You're given the children that are going to be your pupils. And as I said earlier on, most teachers will be very forgiving over the behaviors that they see of children. That said, you can have children come into your class that you find very difficult to teach, that are challenging, that are maybe just not particularly nice, that
Any story
display
that comes to mind
behaviors.
for a child who was a real test for you?
I can think of some, but out of respect for those kids, I'm not going to talk about them.
You don't have to
There's,
say the name though. I think like your
no,
biggest test
no,
as a teacher, maybe that's the bigger question.
yeah, no, I can remember a couple of kids who were just angry. Again, if you empathize with them, you can understand. they didn't come from particularly happy homes themselves. And because they didn't come from particularly happy homes, they didn't bring the best energy into class. Let's say it that way. But my point as a teacher was I loved them all, and you've got to love every child in the class. And that's something that I really took on board. And I always wanted to, I knew that the reason why I wanted to be a teacher was because I had an incredible primary school teacher. And he was an incredible teacher because he genuinely cared about me, certainly. And I knew all of the children. That said, some of the kids in the class I remember at the time didn't like him because he was strict, because he could be tough. But I always saw him as being fair. I always saw it as, yeah, he would be strict with you if you were fucking around, if you were messing around. And I kind of used that. I was kind of that teacher. Kids knew that I had boundaries, but they knew that if they were in my class, that I genuinely cared about them. Now that translates to being a leader, because I think you've got to be the same. There's an element of being a leader within a business where you've got to care about the people that are working for you. Because if you don't, why the hell are you working with them? It's got, who was it? His name. Anthony Hopkins said, everything comes down to love. Everything comes down to love. And it's one of the things that I meditated on for a while. And it's true, like in business, the people you work with, you only really work with them if you love them. You only really work for a company if you love what they do. You only work with another business and align with them if you love the messages that they have. If you like, and so the authors, I'm not going to work with an author unless I love them. I don't want to publish their book unless I love their story. I don't want to work with an artist unless I love their artwork. But that also means them as a person. I want to love them as a person. I want to love who they are. I want to love what they represent. And so it is all about love. I do what I do because I love it. I love the fact that I'm putting out messages that are going to change people. I love the fact that my books might have more impact when I'm no longer on the planet. Like my books might only actually be appreciated for what they are when I'm gone. But that in itself, I love. I love the fact that that's a legacy. I love the fact that I'm doing this for my kids. I love the fact that I'm doing it for the kids that I taught. I love the fact that I get people say to me, well, you're living your dream, aren't you? Like, no, I never dreamt of being a publisher. I never wanted to be a publisher. Why am I doing it? Because that's what people think is crazy. Why are you doing it then if this isn't what you want to do? Well, because my life means something different. I'm purpose driven. I just follow the path that the kids told me to make books. And so I made books. And then other authors told me to become a publisher. I resisted, but eventually when you hear enough authors telling you've got to become a publisher, eventually you've got to listen to it. Because again, it was the universe talking to me, telling me what to do. I followed this path. I do it. It's a
I think
privilege.
that's so beautiful. I spoke yesterday to a human rights lawyer from Georgia, and not sure if you're familiar with the current situation in Georgia, but they have very troubled relationship because of the whole Russia situation. So many authors and journalists are getting persecuted, killed, and put in prison. And there was one story she told me where she went to the streets to demonstrate, and where she ended up getting beaten by 10 people, and then showed me a cool picture in the bar where we had a shot afterwards to rub it off in a way. But I asked her like what gave her the courage, and she said, not going would have been the betrayal of those who were before me, who fought for freedom. And for me, one of the things, for instance, where I realized, oh, my current like Alexandrian is going to work, because for me, love, when somebody really believes in you and loves you, like I will never give up on Alexandrian, because it would prove my father a liar, that I would build something beautiful. Because like belief in love has a prophecy, like a story that is engulfed for you in it in a way. So I think like when somebody really loves you, and it can be a teacher or a lover or a parent. It really is a transformative experience. So my question for you is, was there somebody in your life who ignited this within you, or do you think you have the sense of believing in other people because there was where you're trying to create a mirror world of something that you are lacking, so that you are going to give this to other people right now?
It's a good one. I think again, it's a combination of people. I think as a parent, you've got your kids, and kids are great for believing in their parents normally, if as long as you give them good reason to. And I think as a parent, I gave my kids reason to believe in me. They'd see me work hard. They'd see me always working hard as a teacher and always being a good person, always putting my energy into them. So the kids having a belief, and so doing it for them has always been part of it. And you find that a lot in business. People say it's for their kids, because that's legacy. I suppose even more so for me because the characters were literally based on their toys. Cuddles the puppy was my son's toy puppy, and Kitty Frisbee was his toy cat, and Ballerina Shiny Cat is my daughter's toy cat. And so all these characters that are in them pay homage to the kids to some extent as well. I can't underplay how important Natty's been to the whole business. Coming in as very early on as an illustrator. And she kind of vocalized my dreams once I said, she helped me to become even more thinking bigger. I'd created this company. I'd created the first book, Think Big Playroom. I wrote the second book, Grey. The second book went out under Thinking Bigger. Was the first one I published. At that point, I had no reason to believe in it being more, because I was a realist, because I had nothing around me to give me any indication that Thinking Bigger was ever going to be more than me as an author emailing schools and getting the odd school booking and going in and selling books. And so my vision at that point was to be a traveling author going around and talking about growth mindset. It was only meeting Natty who was like, this business could be huge. Other people before her had said, oh, yeah, Think Big Playroom. Oh, you could make that into a film. Oh, that could be a TV series. And I just dismissed it. I just think, no, that's not going to happen. Because why would I believe that as a guy who just written a book, was marketing it, battling against the world to try and get it out there, had no real. And then Natty came along and was like, no, this can't. And it was her vision that has helped this whole keep building into the point where it is. So I mean, I really would say her. She had undying belief in it all and in me since she joined. And I think again, like we saw that in each other. Like she as a co-publisher for this has been incredible. Her vision, her drive, her hard work, her tenacity, her desire to keep on pushing. And I think, both of us are dedicated to it for each other in that sense as well. So when I met Natty, she said first thing she said was she wanted to work for Thinking Bigger for the rest of her life. Well, that alone gives you, okay, now I'm going to have to make it work then, aren't I? I can't,
Yeah.
you've not given me much choice then. But that's also, do you know what I mean? That's also the kind of alignment where, well, I can trust this. We can trust this path because I know I'm going to be working for Thinking Bigger for the rest of life because it's me. I'm as any business owner, you make that brand, but it's itself is an extension of who you are, because everything you do is the business. It's really hard to go, if I go out and play guitar in a bar, that's still me promoting Thinking Bigger in some way. So for both of us to take that on board, and so for Natty, it's the same for her. Everything she does, we both eat, sleep, and breathe thinking bigger. It's what we do. And that belief is incredible.
I love the commitment, and it's what I hope that this generation will have is more of that. Where one of the things that I'm fascinated by here in Berlin is some of the buildings here took hundreds of years to finish, and I feel like the level of visionaries has been diluted by some of the recent inventions in a way. And I'm completely in love with the fact that human beings existed who had visions that went beyond their own lifetime, where it's one of my favorite quotes is like society blossoms when old men plant trees where they will never sit in the shades of them or something. And that's what I like about you, where from the beginning, where there was an element to you that was transactional, where you're like, that's I learned this kind of mindset from my father through very dark times, because when we were persecuted, they took his bank accounts, they tried to take his life, and sometimes we would have to leave everything we had behind. And so even to this day, everything I own fits into my backpack, but it allows me to be the kind of leader who doesn't need anything in a way where, and it's like, if you think about the ideally what people should be, who can you not intimidate? The person who's doesn't have much to lose is like, fuck you, like, what do you want to take? My apartment? It's like, it's rented. It's like, there's something very powerful about the idea of educating leaders who will
Someone
not
said to me,
budge.
recently, and they were talking about myself in a very humbling way, but they said, that the person that can't be bought is the person who doesn't want anything.
Yeah.
And that's the thing as well. So as a Buddhist, I've got there's nothing that money is a tool. And if someone wants to come and put money into thinking bigger so we can do more, amazing. We will do more. We work with charities, we work with adults with special needs. We have authors coming to us who haven't got any money, artists that haven't got any money, and we help them put their books out. We help them find the money for their books to be made. We when more money comes, we know we're building to that. We've got the taps turned on, and it's starting to drip in. And the more that drips in, the more we'll be able to do. And when we'll be able to create a reservoir, then everyone will drink from it. That's our plan. It's not about, it is only purpose driven. And as you said, it's not transactional. We see it as people are joining us and are aligning with us. And it's like I said with Natty, she wants to work for Thinking Bigger. She knows she's with Thinking Bigger for the rest of her life. So we've got this kind of energy together where we're moving in the same direction. And what we're doing is we're bringing other people in who are also fitting into this vision, and we're all moving in direction. And that's where, if we go back to what I said earlier on, power comes from how many people buy into your story. And so we've created not just a story of Thinking Bigger. We've created this, not just the story of Think Big Playroom. We've created the story of Thinking Bigger. The story of a media company that started out as a teacher who wrote a book about believing in himself. And that became a publishing company creating books. It became a whole IP and brand. It became a whole way of thinking. And it became a film company. And it became a trust fund. And it became something where it was about buying property and educating and charities. And what we're creating is such a story that we're getting all these different people buying in, which is making it more powerful. Like a snowball effect, It's not just one tiny little bit of energy going along. It's all these combined people now walking like an army going forward with the same belief of, no, we're going to fucking change the world.
Yeah.
And the thing is if you get enough people all marching in the same direction going, no, we're going to fucking change the world, guess what happens? You're going to do it, When I first started this, I was told something really quite scary, and that was, you're creating something akin to a Bible. By creating a publishing company that's so message driven, we're going to have 100 books, 100 ISBNs. And when you've got that whole library of books, with it, every single book being message driven and every single book about driving people towards enlightenment, what we're going to have is a set of books where if you gave it to someone and said, read all of that by the end of reading all of those books, they will have it. They'll be on it. And they will be where you and I are now.
Well, I have no intention of being enlightened. I like the darker
Mate,
shades
we
of
could,
life quite well. It's like leave me. I just document. I capture the stories of those who were good people. I will join you guys maybe later. But what you just said is so fascinating. It's like power is how many people you can get to believe in the story. And there was a quote from Napoleon once that I really like, where he said, "Me and Charlemagne needed an entire army and war to be the kind of person worth following." Like Jesus of Nazareth, like didn't even raise a single soldier, and his empire is eternal. And it's like the idea of potentially raising an army through love is something I'm very passionate by, and I think future generations will look at us and they will see our intentions, just like we felt through books and through the people that we've met. We can see what they wanted, and what I hope for is that there's enough people of our generations where future generations will look back at us, say, these guys loved us. They had expectations for us, and they devoted their lives to creating artifacts, items, books, creations, music, whatever, so that the human story will ascend and not perish with them. And then they have this pressure that you felt from your business partner, which is like, fuck, like these guys believed in me. I better not let them down, because that's something wonderful. And also maybe important for those who are listening, great movements start with very small choices. Something. It can be a teacher who decides to write a book, and then a couple of years later, it becomes this big conglomerate of a company. For me, my father decided to answer my letters when he was in prison. And now I'm working on psychological mortality, and it's like it's sometimes very strange things where it's not evident to the eye that this is the seed for a great journey that is going to impact an awful lot of people. So I hope people will not shy away from putting these first words in and see them as potential seeds for what can grow out of it.
yeah, I think, I'm going to be cliched now, but the thing is, the trick is going back to what you just said, you're not enlightened. Well, nobody is. Nobody's enlightened, but you've got to accept that you're on the path. And the moment you think you're not on the path is the moment that things are going to start falling apart for you. Because as long as you're willing to keep learning, and that's where you love learning from other people. You've got this thirst for bringing people in to talk to, so you can just take the next snippet of indicate. You're another sponge. You're a sponge who likes taking in all the information from everyone else around you. So you're on that path of enlightenment, and by being on that path, it's surrendering to a truth of it. Surrendering. We're all on a path of enlightenment, regardless of whether we acknowledge it. The difference is if you choose to acknowledge that path that you're on. For what we're doing as a company to inspire people to become more, that's up to them, isn't it? It's up to them. And this is where the cliche comes. It's up to them to choose to be thinking bigger, because that's what thinking bigger is about. Yes, I started it as a teacher. Yes, I started it with a book. Yes, I started it with a company. Yes, there's all these things that I did along the way where you can go, oh, did it start here? Where did Thinking Bigger start? Did it start with the first Think Big Playroom book? Did it start with me creating the company? Did it start with me publishing first book that I published? Or did it start way before that with me deciding to be the first person in my family to go to university? Or was it me before that when I thought, you know what? I'm going to stand up to my mum. I'm going to be the one that actually decides that I'm going to be more adult than my mum at 9 years old. At 9 years old, it's a story most people don't know and don't believe when they do hear. If I tell it to people, my mum wasn't someone who made the best choices. I lived with just her and my sister in London, in a council house. She had a string of boyfriends when I was really young. Some of them were really bad news. And one time she went out with one of them to a party, and they got really drunk. She came home, she told me all things that I shouldn't really been told, but literally the whole conversation that had led up to this argument about some lewd comments that had been made about her. I think she's probably flirting with them to bring it all out in the first place and stuff. It led to her boyfriend going into the boot of his car and pulling out a sawn-off shotgun. And I was 9 years old at the time. And I was the one that my mum was downstairs screaming in the house, drunk. She'd woken me up. It was about 11 p.m. or something. And I was a 9-year-old kid in my pajamas. And I was the one that stormed across the road and told the guy to fuck off because we don't want him around our fucking house because we're not the kind of people that have fucking guns in our families. And he can fuck off. And we didn't, we never saw him again. That was me as a 9-year-old made that choice to go, you know what? My mum's not fucking capable of making the grown-up decisions that are needed to make sure we're okay. Maybe that's where thinking bigger started, And that's the thing about all of it, is unless you're willing to put yourself to challenge. You said earlier on about you hate learning. Everyone hates learning because learning is related to stress. And that's where growth mindset comes from again. If you believe that stress is good for you, then you respond better in stressful situations. So if you can be mindful of the fact that, okay, I'm learning here, that's why I'm stressed, that's why I'm sweating, that's why I'm finding this pressured, because I'm doing something I've never done before, and I'm telling myself I can't do it. I've got imposter syndrome. I'm not sure. The feelings of pressure on. That's the stress point that you need to go beyond to learn the thing that you can't do, to get to do the new skill that you couldn't do before. Means putting yourself out of your comfort zone to challenge yourself on with a new skill set. If people aren't willing to do those basic things, they're never going to be thinking bigger. They're never going to be that person who goes, I'm going to listen to the universe. You won't even get to that point where you listen to the universe because you'd have never taken on board all the messages that are needed to get to that point.
Some story I would like to tell for people who haven't found a way to start learning, and thanks so much for this touching story, is I found a study once, Gary, where people who have cancer miss on their medication, but they never miss on the medication of they give to their cats, which I think is kind of crazy. It's like the fact that one of the acknowledgements that I feel is good to make is that people not always like themselves. And for me, when I was working as a behaviorist, I studied how some of the old behaviorists got people to take care and partake in life. And it was always by reminding of themselves who else is in their orbit, who they loved, and how their improvement could improve their situations. And for me personally, like I learned because I love the people around me. And because it's like for me, like making connections, learning from people like you, creating this living library of forever is for me increases my chance that I can protect them. Like that's for me because I hate people making my family like they're powerless. It's like for me, my mom was grew up very poor, and I hated all those moments where people took advantage of us, or treated us like we were nothing. And for me, like learning, like for those people who maybe don't open a book because they don't care much about themselves, learning can also be an act of love by becoming the kind of person who can protect those who you could help if you would become more. And that's something that I feel your story exemplifies, is like how your own journey of teaching and learning and now allows you to pay people salaries, help other authors with getting their story out and kickstarting their adventures. So I think that's always like having a self-transcending view. I think it's always something that works for people who have a challenging relationship with themselves.
Yeah, and it is all about doing it for other people as well. You know, I made the decision, as I said really early on, to become a teacher, and I said we were saying to the careers advisor, I didn't want to make a rich person richer. I wanted to put things back. I wanted to put back into society. I'm doing it for people. I'm doing it for others. I know it wasn't about what I would get back. I knew I was never going to become rich being a teacher. Um, and it's about, you know, we all have to be charitable. And if you're starting a business, people will tell you you've got to be philanthropist. You've got to be a philanthropist. If you want to bring in angel investors, you've got to be an angel investor. If you want to bring in someone who wants to put money into your company, then you've got to be the kind of person who wants to put that money into other companies. You're only going to attract money if you want to give money away, because the only people who are going to give you money are going to be the people who are attracted to you because you're someone who gives money. In the same way as if you want to be an author that has books that people read, you've got to read other people's books. If you want people to buy your books, you've got to buy other people's books, because we attract what we are. We attract what the people that are the same as us and the energies that same as us. So if we want people to learn, then we've got to be willing to learn. And if we want to be on the path of enlightenment, or if we want others to be on the path of enlightenment, then we've got to be on. So everything that we want we want to see in other people, we've got to show that ourselves.
Authors are also the spokesperson of each generation. I think there's a lot of strange things happening in the world. Like when you turn on the news, what are feelings that you're having in regards to the current situation in the world? If you would describe as an author in your own words, from a narrative perspective, where's mankind right now?
Fucking nuts. I think I a few years back, I was in quite an angry place, because of the world, because of the craziness of it all. I understand, again, I know I understand it on a level better than most people. So things like, you know, I said post-truth, we are in a post-truth time where this idea that we have different sections of society living within completely different realities is true. You know, the people that have bought into a narrative that is being shared by the Trump administration, for example, if they've been following that narrative for long enough, then their view of the world will be so different to someone who has been following the other side. So, you know, and if depending on who you choose to get your media and your literature and your narrative from, will change how you see the world. So there are people who see conflicts in the world completely different. So, for example, you talked about Georgia earlier on. People in Georgia will view the conflict that's going on there and the troubles and the challenges that they face completely different to how someone from Russia will see it. And they'll have completely different views over whose fault it is. They'll have completely different views about what's right and wrong. They may even have completely different views about facts and factual information, to the point where some people, you know, so the way that I perceive it is, if a bomb goes off, it's not a question of whether it's gone off because nobody heard it. It's not a case of, if a bomb goes off, if nobody hears it, it didn't go off. It goes off because that we have fundamental truth. We have we all do live in the same reality. We all do live on the same planet. And if a tree falls down in a forest, it doesn't matter if anyone's there to hear it, it fell down. Because we know that, because we go in, we find the tree horizontal when we go in. In the same way as if a bomb goes off and destroys half a city, we can find that out by going back and looking at that city, or even the satellite images that we get afterwards. We do have a fundamental truth. We do have one truth. Where we are at is where we've got politics choosing to use the idea of different realities to legitimize anything they're doing. But there is no right or wrong anymore. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you tell the truth. It doesn't matter if you lie. It doesn't matter so a genocide is a genocide, and it doesn't seem to matter, or it's not. It's not if you choose to ignore it. And so for me, like, it's just the question of how does it make me feel watching the news at the moment? It just makes me deeply sad. It makes me deeply sad because I know that 99% of the people out there don't understand things as well as I do to appreciate all of this. There's 99, so many people that I know that think they're more informed about it all than I am, have emotional responses to it all because they're still bought into one of the narratives. Whereas I see all of the narratives, I've been following all of them, and this is a sad thing. I was talking to someone else. We have to appreciate, again, if you appreciate neurodiversity, you appreciate that some people don't have internal voices, some people don't have internal dialogue, some people don't have a moral compass, some people can't visualize, some people can't hear things. Some people have such poor memories that they can't remember the narrative from 10 years ago, that they can't remember what life was like in the 1980s. What their memory of the 1980s is a facsimile they've created from a photo or from watching a TV program. We've got people whose memories are so poor that they can't remember exactly what happened around September the 11th when the Twin Towers went down, and that they paid so little attention to everything in the whole period anyway, that they never learned everything that I learned. So they don't know that there are questions over X, Y, and Z, or that this conspiracy theory has been proved, or that this thing that we were told actually was proven to be wrong later on, or that Cambridge Analytica were actually the company that ran this election, this election, this election. And if people don't know all of these things, and people don't realize that we've been manipulated with the narratives we've been fed, and if people haven't followed all of the narratives to realize all the bullshit we live in, they haven't got hope. And so that's the thing that I see is that I watch the news and I go, okay, I'm just watching a narrative. I'm just watching a narrative at play. And all we've got is, through all of the media, is who pays the most for that narrative. So whether you're watching Sky News, whether you're watching ABC or whoever you're watching, it's pay to view. It's pay to view for the people who are running it, whether it's a politician, a political party, whether it's Elon Musk, whether it's a far right group, whether it's a far left group. Someone owns that media channel and is giving you this narrative. And the job again, they don't even have to worry about being consistent with themselves anymore, because people have got such short memories that it doesn't matter if they go back and go, oh yeah, well, we were wrong about that, but never mind, we're right about this. And so for me, the underlying thing is sadness. It's just looking at, again, and it's what we're talking about, the power is how many people buy into your story. And that's what we've got. We've got so many people have bought into Donald Trump's story. So many people have bought into the far right story. So many people have bought into the far left story that they're lost. they're lost in that story, and that story has power over them. People don't have power over themselves.
I think like you and I are very interesting because I think we're some of them over the extreme spectrum of having our own opinions. And for me, this Israel-Palestine conflict, for instance, I have very mixed feelings about this because the people who tried to kill my father back in the days were radical Islams. Because my father, like, came to Germany, said, I don't want to work as a spy anymore, and fell in love with my mother and said, and ever since he's been a ghost. For me, it's very hard to sympathize with a movement where I have personal feelings for it. Having that said, I always think of a client I once has, and I'm not gonna say her name, but she had a violent husband, and the husband, he would come home, beat her, and then when she would confront her why he beat her, he would say, "I didn't beat her. What are you talking about?" And he did this for weeks to a degree where she doubted her sanity, and we worked during this time together. And it was one of my first clients where I was actively strategically helping somebody to get out of the web of a psychopath. And it was terrifying for me because, but I sometimes turn on the news and I'm like, are we really in a society where where every media has been bought? And it's,
Yeah.
I don't watch any news anymore because it feels to me like where they're optimizing it for clicks and headlines,
Yeah.
and the newspapers seem gone to me. And
Yeah.
it's like
Oh, a long
even
time
like,
ago. Yeah. A long time
yeah,
ago.
the
In this
newspapers are
country,
gone.
newspapers
They're
are
like
gone.
completely
Yeah.
gone. And it's like, and it's these magazines. So it's like, even though like this conversation stay niche, nobody's paying me to say what I want to say, and nobody's paying you either. How do you think we can return to a post? Yeah, and also one of the things I find interesting when we didn't want to use the word evil back in the first part of our interview. There's a great book I can recommend for people. It's called People of the Lie by Scott Peck. It's a story of malevolent individuals, and he called evil, another word for evil, is lies, like people who act that out in a way. So that's like how I'm thinking about it. What advice do you have for our current generation to return back to having truth as the center stone of, I think, like our culture? Because I feel we seem to have lost that in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing. I mean, someone I met on the early part of the Thinking Bigger journey, we get profound things told to us, don't we? And one of the things I was told was that Thinking Bigger was going to had an important part to play in the paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift I see as being moving into a neo-truth situation, like it's where we reconnect with the knowledge we have at a deeper level, because there's a lot of knowledge that's been hidden, that's been, because narratives have been allowed to run the world essentially for so long. It requires widespread teaching of critical thinking. That's what it requires. It requires that a massive widespread teaching of critical thinking and realignment of an agreed truth. And it requires political bodies being captured by intellectual and intelligent people, I think, who are wholly good people. We need a return to morals, and we need to be teaching morals. So I'm working with a curriculum company in Dubai that is creating a secular moral curriculum. So a moral curriculum that transcends religion, that is based on morals that we can all agree on. I think that's really important. I think that's like really, really important. And that's going to be part of what we use as our manifesto moving forward, I think. Because we have to have an agreed thing where it's not about backgrounds, it's not about history, it's about, well, where are we going moving forward? Because I take what you're saying, that all conflicts around the world divide us, because that's the intention. Some of them are bonkers. Some of the world. When I lived in Vietnam, one of the things I loved about living there was that it was, at the time, there were 208 countries registered in the world. Now it's down to like 198. I'm guessing through countries reforming or something. But I remember current list at that time said there were 208 countries and 11 were at peace. So 197 countries out of 208 were at war. And when you look at some of those wars, it's bonkers stuff. Thailand and Cambodia are at war. Just along their border, they're shooting at each other over a temple. I believe it's a temple or a historical building, some important bit of land that's very important to both of them. But at war because of it, losing lives because of it. Both of these are Buddhist countries. And Buddhism is all about peace and love, and not, yes, you can get Buddhist warriors. Don't get me wrong. I've got one on my t-shirt. But for me, the idea that actually we should all be just promoting peace, like the fact that isn't something. In fact, that even me saying that we should be promoting peace will trigger some people to get people. How dare you say we should be peaceful? Like, there are genuinely people. I live in a military city. Portsmouth's a very highly military city. So me believing in peace is about as neurodivergent as you can get. Like, it genuinely upsets people, the fact that I don't believe we should be at war. So in terms of where do we go? How do we create that realignment? Morals, an agreed set of morals that have become, again, morals are a dirty word. Integrity is a dirty word. Like, the idea that people work with integrity, the idea that people some people, it upsets them to even question the idea that there's good and bad. The idea that there is good and bad in the world, because you ask some politicians, and their beliefs are that that nothing they do is wrong, and that there is no wrong, because actually causing suffering to someone is a kind thing to do because it gives them enlightenment. Generally, what some politicians would say, that actually an act of war to cause suffering on a whole body of people was an act of love because it gave them enlightenment. There's an argument I've heard at a political level. It's shocking. Where do we go?
These are. Have you read? Is it from who said it? In Germany, said nothing new on the West Front. It's an old German book written about hundreds of years ago about the First World War and the meaninglessness of it all. And one of the scenes always stuck with me from the book is where's this young German guy, and they blow the whistle and then they run into the machine fire, and he hid in this crater of a bomb, and there's a French guy who's running in, and he stabs him with the bayonet, but he doesn't die immediately. And they have this moment of human to human connection where you say, like, this guy looks exactly like me. And one of the things that I just feel is that meaning is memory also. The fact that where many of these people who vote for wars, they never even have been exposed to violence in their private lives. Like, I've seen people shot. I've seen people. I know what it feels like, how it looks like when somebody cuts you and the white of your flesh open. It's like anybody who I've seen who's been exposed to real violence says, like, no, thank you. No, keep that away from me. And I just feel that there's a sense of like they just don't know the terrors of war anymore. And like, one of the movies I can recommend for anybody, we were speaking about threats. I think war has also changed, where we are all connected by, in Germany you say Zündschnur. It's these things you put on fire before the dynamite blows up. And I think, like, we're sitting on a nuclear arsenal where one war can ignite the whole world and blow us back into God only knows what happens afterwards. And it's like one movie I
Yeah.
think people should see. It's like do you know the movie Come and See?
Honestly, no, I'm not sure about that.
I can recommend anybody. Come and See or Threats are two of my favorite anti-war movies that I think people
I'll
should
check it out.
watch.
Daniel,
Anyway,
I'm gonna have to
yeah,
go soon. Actually, I think.
let's have this last two questions and then we're gonna shut it up. Okay. Um, 3 questions, then you're up to go. If this podcast were the only piece of your journey to survive the test of time, like an elder sea scroll, so to say, and people would find it in 1,000 of years, what would that message be like?
Um, don't believe anything you have been told your whole life, because from what I've seen in my 46 years, it's all been bullshit. And everything that I know to be true, I've kind of always known and believed it in myself and had to prove it myself, and I've been proven right. We are magic. We are capable of doing far more than the universe will allow you to believe until you force yourself through the hero's journey to know the ultimate truth. We're capable of a lot more than our bags of meat flesh um, allow us to believe.
If you meet your maker in heaven, what do you hope you will see? And what's the first thing you expect him to come out of his mouth?
Oh, hmm. The message I can imagine hearing is, "What a waste." Um, I could have done so much more. um, no, I don't know. I hope I've done my best. I hope I've done my best. That's all. Um, I don't know what to expect. I don't. I think, yeah, for me, I've never anthropomorphized God. I've never kind of thought of God in a human form. I always saw it quite bizarre, the idea it was a human form. I questioned it from the moment. I see the way I see it is it's the universe. It's the accumulate. It's everything. Um, all space, all time, and all knowledge. And we, as I said, we are magic. We are all connected with these invisible threads, and we are a neural network, like a mycelium network of mushroom spores underground that connects everything, that connects all the trees and that pulls on all the threads. Humans are a neural network where when we sleep and we dream, and when we meditate, and when we think with intention, and when we astral project, and when we have out of body experiences, and when we have memories, and when we have imaginations, and when we soothsay and look forward, and when we have think back and remember stuff, all of that is this incredible energetic mycelium network of knowledge and of information. And you see these neural networks replicated throughout space and time, throughout all magnifications. So as small as a mycelium, as a mushroom network under the ground, to watching the movements of humans using their mobile phone data is another replication of mycelium networks, to how social media networks work online. You can draw those out and they form mycelium networks. Or the way that cities form, or railroads form, and rail networks form. Or even if you zoom really far out and the universes and the galaxies become neural networks of light. And when you zoom out far enough, the universe itself becomes a neural network. And we are all this neural network of information. And so I feel like I already speak to my maker on a regular basis because I've tapped into that universe, because I've tapped into just going, okay, if I meditate without ego and I remove everything, I know everything. No, but I don't believe I'm special. I believe we all do, but we all just have to tap into it. And yeah, for me, it's that understanding that if I meet Maker, then it's probably going to be one massive fuck off ball of light.
Well, let's hope that he will allow you to have a little bit more of screen time while you're here, at least until we can have an adventure in person. Gary, you're one of the most helpful person I've ever met in my life. How can we help you? Even though the audience of this podcast is small, it is filled with powerful people and people who are sovereign thinkers who are looking also forward to opportunities to help. What can we do for you, and where can we find you and support you and the work you're doing?
Thank you, man. Yeah, I mean, support buying books. Buying books is as any author will tell you, is what we all need. We all need you to buy our books. And believe in what we're doing. Believe it. Keep an eye out for Thinking
Where
Bigger.
can we find the books?
Follows. So they're online on Amazon. They're going to be available through all bookshops worldwide fairly soon. We've got a distribution deal set up. But the best way to get them is through our website. Come to www.thinkingbiggerltd.co.uk. The books are there. The books are on Amazon. But if you come to our website, you'll be able to see what we're doing, the kind of books we're putting out, and meet the team and what we do. What we're doing to bring enlightenment to a new generation. We are going to be getting bigger in a couple of years' time. I don't think there's any way people are going to miss us. We're being talked about in very high places, so it tells us we're on the right track.
Also close this podcast. One of my favorite sayings, the saying my father says quite often, it's a Talmud saying, is like, person who saves one life saves the world entire. And your work has impacted hundreds of thousands of children, and that speaks for itself. It was an honor and a privilege to talk to you. I am blessed to be called your friend, and I'm looking forward to collaborate with you in the future. Thank you so much for everybody who took the time to listen to our 72-hour episodes, and I'm looking forward to have the next author on soon. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Daniel, man. It's a pleasure to be called your friend as well, man. It's seeing what you're doing and what you're building with Alexandrian is humbling. You've got a really big vision for this, and I can see how important it's going to be for the future. So thank you so much.